Good morning and welcome to the Sabi Sands here in South Africa. We are at wet and rainy Djuma and Arathusa private game reserves, and some of you may be a little bit disappointed that it's raining because it means we are not out there looking for animals, but to be honest, it's a huge blessing, and this area is very dry. It's abnormally dry this early into our winter, so these late rains could make a big difference for the herbivores and the plant life in this area. And if we do manage to get out a little bit later, which we're all obviously hoping to do, we will in all likelihood see some very happy animals running around, because they literally will know that this is going to make a huge difference. It's been raining since about 9 o'clock last night, as we all dished up our dinner to eat, and we eat outside. The rain started coming down, and it was a beautiful, beautiful evening. A lot of lightning and thunder, an initial torrential downpour, and then it slowed down and has continued to just pitter-patter throughout the night until now. So it's been a constant and steady amount of rainfall over coming on about 9 hours now. So very good for the environment, but sadly with all the very important equipment in order to get these pictures to you, we cannot go out into the rain and get anything wet. So the plan is for now to answer any of your questions, and it is a great opportunity to answer any questions that you may be interested in sending through to us. Now, to do that, you would hashtag Safari Live on Twitter or send through an email to questions@wildearth.tv. So then the people in final control, Nikki and Tara, will go through the questions and try and relay them through to me on an earpiece. We've got VM on camera, and depending on how long we are stuck here for, some of the other presenters may come through and answer some of your questions too. So start sending those through to us, and I look forward to getting to help you understand what we do and answer any of the questions that you may be thinking of. Now, as I said, it's a little bit drier than normal for this time of the year. Our rainy season is during our summer, so we typically get rain in November, December and January. Those are typical high rainfall months, and we did get rain in those months, but probably about half of what we would normally expect to get. Since then, February, March, April, it has been very dry. We can get a few later rains at this period, but this has been the first substantial rain we've had in months. So it really will be wonderful to be able to head out a little bit later, and I'm hoping we will be able to, but we've all been standing outside and looking up at the clouds. None of us are too sure as to what exactly to predict. So Stefan seems to think that it's going to clear up fairly shortly. His theory is that he can hear the birds calling, and he thinks that that may be an indication that they may know the rain may be coming to a close. So that's something to think about. Okay, well, we've just got our first question through. Good morning, Elizabeth, and welcome to Djuma. It's, as you can tell, is raining, and Elizabeth is interested to know, when last did we receive rain like this? Now, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm guessing it was probably in January, and that would have been our last rainfall of this kind of quantity. So that's something to think about, and we're not entirely sure if we'll get more rain after this, but what we can assure you, Elizabeth, is that this is already going to make a huge difference to the plants and therefore the animals that eat the plants out here. So a lot of the herbivores are going to get a few extra mouthfuls of food due to this rain. And continuing on the topic of rain, Elizabeth, we wouldn't quite call it a drought scenario yet. Even though it is a drier year than normal, we do expect these in cycles. In this area, it's kind of been noted that there's a 7-year cycle when every 7 years we'll expect a drier year or kind of semi-drought conditions. So that does fall into the right time frame to expect that. Now, it was about 7 years ago that we had our last very dry period in this area. And for those of you who are wondering exactly where we are in South Africa, we are in the kind of northeastern corner. So that's something to think about. I've just heard now that some of the first game drive vehicle has headed out, so there will be some guests with their ponchos on and their raincoats, and they've headed out hoping to find some animals. So that's great for us. Even though we hear there's other people that are going out and exploring, and I can hear what they're up to on my earpiece. So there are the people looking for animals, and as soon as this rain does subside, we'll head out and hopefully they'll have some great sightings already lined up for us. One second, folks. I'm just going to turn down the Game Drive channel because it'll be more important for me to get an update when we do head out. Now that they're all heading out, it's creating quite a lot of extra noise in my ear. So one second. So just to explain exactly what I did there, basically in the vehicles we've got two radios, and the other channel links me to all the other vehicles who are out on safari. Links me to all the other vehicles who are out on safari. And it's vital that we do communicate and help one another when we are out here. It's a vast area, radio, as well as, for example, if one vehicle does head out and he's searching a certain area, he'll let other vehicles know that he's there. And it's vital that we do communicate and help one another when we are out here. It's a vast area, radio, as well as, for example, if one vehicle does head out and he's searching a certain area, he'll let other vehicles know that he's there. Therefore, people can split up and spread out through the reserve, and then when some hearing a little bit of torture because we're not out there and they are. But to be honest, I'm happy where we are here, and it is still a little bit wet. Bit of torture because we're not out there and they are, but to be honest, I'm happy where we are here, and it is still a little bit wet. Okay, we just got a question through from Carol and Tina. Good morning and welcome. Fencing now is being soaked up into the earth. The water table is very. Most of the rain that we'll be receiving now is going to be sucked into the earth, and therefore, okay. Okay, Christine in Texas. Snow here experienced in the summertime over November, December and January, and over that period there is a chance of hail, sometimes the size of golf. Snow is a no-no. Okay, Christine in Texas. Snow here experienced in the summertime over November, December and January, and over that period there is a chance of hail. Snow is a no-no. To put things in perspective, I was born and raised in South Africa, and the first time that I saw 21 snow, but hail certainly is a problem. Lucille and welcome. Lucille is interested to know whether the animals will kind of hide out in this weather, or will they continue their natural movements. Some of them will certainly hide out where they can, but there's not too much cover wherever you are, even if you're under at least really be able. Earlier on, I noticed there were some flying ants. Now, this is an example of an animal that, they will termite mound elsewhere. So that's how termite mounds begin, and we see huge exodus of these flying around the first rains. Now, what's bites huge birds. We even saw a hyena in November through the quarantine clearance eating the termites. They're very high in protein, and that's just an example of how certain animals will be brought out during the rains. It's not only the termites, we can expect the tortoises to disrupt now that feeding, acquire some more moisture. Eating the termites, they're very high in protein, and that's just an example of how certain animals will be brought out during the rains. It's not only the termites, we can expect the tortoises to disrupt now that feeding, acquire some more moisture, and that's something that I seriously look forward to seeing, because a lot of the smaller animals... Okay. Another good question, and morning Jody, but that will come through, but more important, I'll start with the first part. Most of the roads are actually designed to tolerate the rain, and you may have noticed while we're driving along that there's certain almost speed bumps every 50 or 100 meters. Now, what look to be speed bumps are actually drainage systems. So by building a big mound in the road, it prevents water running down the road and building up momentum and essentially causing a river, which would erode the road away. So to prevent erosion, there are these big bumps that help maintain the roads during the rainy season. Having said that, there are certain roads that do go through areas that do become waterlogged, and they also are in an area where you get a soil called black cotton soil. Now, black cotton soil is like a sponge. When it's dry, you can drive on it no problem, and it's hard, but as soon as there's a bit of moisture, it literally turns into quicksand, and if you were to drive the vehicle in there, you would bottom out and be stuck. But it's one of the things you learn early on in your guiding career. As soon as you see the soil, you avoid the area at all costs. Now, the second part of the question is from Jody, is whether we can track easier in the rain or after the rain. Yes and no, Jody. What the rain does is it clears the canvas. So all of the roads and pathways that would have had tracks on have now been washed away. Therefore, any animal that walks and we can still see the tracks without the rain removing them would indicate to us that they're fresh. So it can help us, but in the same regard, it can also make things a little bit more difficult. Now, it makes it more difficult because as there's more rain, you can probably hear the thunder now, and also the rain is increasing in intensity. There is a little bit of thunder off to the distance. Now, the reason why the tracking becomes harder is you can imagine a lot of the soils, as soon as they become wet, they will harden and compact. They don't become dry and dusty and easy to leave a mark in. So certain roads will actually become harder and more difficult to see tracks in until one or two vehicles have driven down the road, churned that sand up, made it a little bit softer, and therefore allow for the animals to leave a depression as they go along. So up and down, but I'm happy to go out and track in these conditions, because like I say, if you do find tracks, you will know they're fresh, because tracks that are older would have been washed away. Aha, we've got a question through from Norm in Michigan. And again, thanks so much for sending all these questions through. There have been some great questions so far this morning. And Norm is asking whether it becomes easier for the predators to hunt in these rainy conditions. And I think it certainly does, and I'll tell you why, Norm. Because there's rain creating a lot of ambient noise, it will make the approach of the predator that's sneaking up on its prey a lot more muffled, and therefore they'll probably not hear it coming. so I think the rain certainly will help the predators. Look, it may be a little bit more slippery, but that's for both the predator and the prey. So I guess the slippery aspect of it may curb things, but the most important factor is that as a leopard or lion creeps up to whatever it's stalking, that animal's going to really battle to hear because of all the pitter-patter that it'll be hearing from the rain falling on the leaves and the roads. So it's good hunting conditions, and we can expect that a lot of the predators will be out, not only hunting now because it's the noise that's causing a bit of disturbance to their prey, but also because it's nice and cool. So that's a lesser factor, but it does make a difference. Okay, now Jan, good morning and welcome. Jan is interested to know whether the rain will make the riverbeds that we have through this reserve start to flow. Now, again, because the water table is very low, I think the soil will be absorbing a lot of the rain that we're getting, and therefore I don't think it's likely that the riverbeds will be flowing. Be absorbing a lot of the rain that we're getting, and therefore I don't think it's likely that the riverbeds will be flowing, but one or two maybe, and just for a short period of time. We'll have to convince that the riverbeds did flow, but one or two maybe, and just for a short period of time. We'll have to convince that the riverbeds did flow. So if you cheer and wait for this rain to stop, there are the other presenters who are lingering in the background, and they are also going to come and answer some of your questions shortly. So we will take turn of moving around, as well as a few smaller animals like snails and so if you cheer and wait for this rain to stop, there are the other presenters who are lingering in the background, and they are also going to come and answer some of your questions shortly. So we will take turn of moving around, as well as a few smaller animals like snails and tortoises that we haven't been seeing for months. So there certainly are good prospects for later, but in tortoises that we haven't been seeing for months. So there certainly are good prospects for later, but in the meantime, through your questions, which okay, Georgiana in Illinois, good morning and welcome. Now, Georgiana is interested in knowing how good the drainage system is there, but I'm confident that it shouldn't cause a problem. Is there, but I'm confident that it shouldn't cause a problem. Like I say, we haven't had rain for so long that a lot of this rain and moisture will be a picture. And morning, Brent.
Morning, Scottish.
How wonderful to see where animals have moved. But if you do get lucky and you do find a track, you will know it's very fresh. So there's pros and cons, I guess. But let's share what until back, Brent. We'll see you later.
Cheers, Scott. Everyone. Nice and damp this morning. I'm a little bit sad it rained, but it is good for the animals, but it does make tracking a little bit more difficult. But it is what it is. And I will it to rain a little bit. I like it to getting to go. And I will it to rain a little bit. I like it to getting to go. Good morning, Lucy. But very, very seldom. I'm quite lucky. I seem to draw a lot of. Good morning, Lucy. But very, very seldom. I'm quite lucky. I seem to draw a lot of energy from being out in the bush, so I don't get tired too often. Good. Alex would like to know, with the rain, does it help energy from being out in the bush? So I don't get tired too often. Good. Alex would like to know, with the rain, does it help the bird life? Energy from being out in the bush, so I don't get tired too often. Good. Alex would like to know, with the rain, does it help the bird life? Energy from being out in the bush, so I don't get tired too often. Good. Alex would like to know, with the rain, does it help the bird life? Well, yes and no. I mean, the birds will definitely... The bird life? Well, yes and no. I mean, the birds will definitely... Birds will definitely... Sorry, I forgot to mention that what the question was. It was does the rain help bluebird food for a bit longer? Sorry, I forgot to mention that what the question was. It was does the rain help bluebird food for a bit longer? Two love, and it's going to be working quite often when they're not on leave. We're going to have two directors working. Sorry, I forgot to mention that what the question was. It was does the rain help bluebird food for a bit longer? So we're very excited to have Tara joining us here, and far she's the So we're very excited to have Tara joining us here, and far she's the apparently there's quite a lot of talk about lions fighting. I don't actually know anything about our neighbor to the north. Last night they were seen around. So we're very excited to have Tara. So we're very excited to have Tara joining us here, and far she's the apparently there's quite a lot of talk about lions fighting. I don't actually know anything about our neighbor to the north. Last night they were seen around the Manuleti boundary, and I know the Nkahumas were in the area, but I'm not sure whether the Matimba, and especially when it's in there wet, the mane drooping down. And I know the Nkahumas were in the area, but I'm not sure whether the Matimba, and especially when it's in there wet, the mane drooping down. But it is possible, and I will try. But it is possible, and I will try to find out about what. Apparently the feed's a little bit choppy. We do apologize, but it could definitely be the weather, which is really set in now. It's actually starting to again. Apologize, but it could definitely be the weather, which is really set in now. It's actually starting to again. Good morning. Really, and it's always good for us as apologize, but it could definitely be the weather, which is really set in now. It's actually starting to again. Good morning. Really, and it's always good for us as presenters and guides is that we all have a set of knowledge and we can all learn from each other. So it's great to have someone to bounce ideas, something particular. Good. As presenters and guides is that we all have a set of knowledge and we can all learn from each other. So it's great to have someone to bounce ideas, something particular. Good morning, Adriana. As presenters and guides, is that we all have a set of knowledge and we can all learn from each other. So it's great to have someone to bounce ideas, something particular. Good morning, Adriana. Welcome. Adriana would like to know where the leopards would be right now. As well, smell as well. So we all have a set of knowledge and we can all learn from each other. So it's great to have someone to bounce ideas, something particular. Good morning, Adriana. Welcome. Adriana would like to know where the leopards would be right now. As well, smell as well. So they could be hunting. They could have made kills last night because it was very dark with the rain. Perfect, thank you. Your questions don't have to be animal related. Could be hunting. They could have made kills last night because it was very dark with the rain. Perfect, thank you. Your questions don't have to be animal related. You can ask us a little bit about ourselves and camp life, living in the bush. But we will definitely try to find out more about a little bit about ourselves and camp life, living in the bush. But we will definitely try to find out more about those lions. You guys out there, maybe you're online and you know more than me. So, or anyone, if you know a little bit more about these lions fighting, could send through. Definitely try to find out more about those lions. You guys out there, maybe you're online and you know more than me. So, or anyone, if you know a little bit more about these lions fighting, could send through the information to us. And whatnot, just to let you know exactly where we are. And whatnot, just to let you know exactly where we are and who's around us. At the moment, we're sitting in the car park of the high density of leopards and lions in this area, and who's around us. At the moment, we're sitting in the car park of the high density of leopards and lions in this area, and we often work together very closely with the commercial operators, specifically almost unparalleled anywhere in the world. And we're very, very lucky. We often work together very closely with the commercial operators, specifically almost unparalleled anywhere in the world. And we're very, very lucky to be in a place like Djuma and Arathusa and to have the support. Sam would like to know if a plant or animal has gone dormant. To be in a place like Djuma and Arathusa and to have the support. Sam would like to know if a plant or animal has gone dormant with this heavy rain. Is it likely to wake up?
And now that burrow may have filled up with water and now it's looking
place like Djuma and Arathusa and to have the support. Sam would like to know if a plant or animal has gone dormant with this heavy rain. Is it likely to wake up?
And now that burrow may have filled up with water and now it's looking for somewhere else to live.
Thanks very much. Very, very relevant. So, especially your at least 10 centimeters of sand is completely saturated. But there are
may have filled up with water and now he's looking for somewhere else to live.
Thanks very much. Very, very relevant. So, especially your at least 10 centimeters of sand is completely saturated. But there are going to be quite a lot of animals that are forced out, like your insects. But they're going to be other. And for those of you who on drive with me yesterday, we spoke a little bit about a funny little grumpy frog that looks like really fashionably to look at. And for those of you who on drive with me yesterday, we spoke a little bit about a funny little grumpy frog that looks like really fashionably to look at. In short, could be related to wolf spiders, but I don't want to poke them too much. But if anyone out there possibly knows a little bit more about spiders than me, and see if you... But if anyone out there possibly knows a little bit more about spiders than me, and see if you... And I get to take some... But if anyone out there possibly knows a little bit more about spiders than me, and see if you... And I get to take some photos while I'm out there. And since I've been here, I think from a photographic point, right in front of Weatela Lodge, and Jumati almost stopped fighting, and he was up the road, and he called me on the radio and said, listen, there's like 3 buffalo for greater vision or more enhanced vision with less light. Less of it is lost. Now, to give you an example of what a tapetum is, if you have to shine your torch into your cat's or your dog's eyes, you will see that reflection from the back of the eyeball, from those light reflecting crystals at the back of the eyeball. That is exactly what the wolf spiders have, and it gives them enhanced vision at nighttime. And mainly nocturnal spiders, they hunt at nighttime, they hunt using their vision and their excellent senses, those hairs all over their body. And you know, they make for wonderful spiders. You know, it's something I go out of my way not to kill, and to keep on reinforcing the fact that you don't have to kill every spider that you see. It's far more beneficial for you to keep them alive. However, there are some spiders that you don't really want in your house, and it's the key to learn those. They're by far the minority, by far. Out of all the thousands, tens of thousands of spider species in South Africa, we only have 4 species that are of medical importance, and of those really only 2 are a problem to us. Yes? Hello Samantha from Connecticut, welcome. It's nice to get a question about this, and thank you for being concerned about our safety here in the bush. But the question was, what do we do to take precautions against getting bitten by these poisonous spiders? Obviously, here in the bush, we're trying to live in equilibrium with the animals here. So you don't want to use too many insecticides and keep your doors closed all the time and really be a panic about it. You won't live easy out here if you panicked about everything. But the general rule of thumb is you keep yourself nice and clean. So you keep your environment nice and clean. That'll limit insects that come into your room in search of food. That'll limit the predators that hunt those insects. So definitely, for me at least anyway, number 1 rule of thumb is you keep your space nice and clean, and you'll therefore limit the amount of you know, spiders or predators that come into your bedroom.
Laura in Ohio has asked me that because my favorite animal is a honey badger, which I've mentioned on a few of the drives, how often do I get to see them? They're actually quite tough to see in the bush, to be honest with you. They're small, they're quite short or stubby, probably this big, nose to tail, that high, foot to shoulder, and you really have to be lucky to see them. In this part of the Kruger National Park, they're predominantly nocturnal. You find their tracks quite often on the roads, but you don't see them. We come back to camp way before they start foraging. And you really have to start going to the drier areas of the country, towards the west coast and to the national parks up the west coast and into Namibia and into the western part of Botswana before you start seeing honey badgers during the day or on game drive where you can see them. And there you get to see honey badgers as often as you like. You just follow around these little mini dust clouds where they're digging out insects and rodents and whatnot, and you get to see them. I would say that half of the camps out here have a resident honey badger or pair of honey badger that utilize the camp for scraps of food, but we keep quite a clean shop out here because of the hyena presence close to the lodges, so there's no honey badgers that are residents at this particular camp. But thank you very much for that question. I don't see them often enough is probably the short answer. Tess has asked me how my first week presenting has been different to how traditional guiding has been, and I must be honest, it's been refreshing is one word that comes to mind. It's been very different. I like to talk a lot, and generally having a camera behind you and being able to converse with an audience that's sitting in a completely different country has been quite alien. It's been quite fun, I must be honest. And the fact that we get to spend so much more time with the animals is something that I enjoy to do. I enjoy animal behavior, and the way that we do the shows here, the way that we present the shows to you here, allows us to spend an extraordinary amount of time with some really cool animals. And it's definitely a bit easier in some ways as well. As you can imagine, people who are coming here and paying for holidays quite often keep you busy from way before sunrise to just before sunrise in some cases. So it's definitely been a nice balance between being on safari and being in the bush, still being able to interact with guests and with questions that are coming from all over the world, but not really having that massive pressure that comes with dealing with people you know, on holiday and in the back of your vehicle. I mean, diverse people as well. Yes. Yes. Virginia has asked me what animal I'm most afraid of, and I wouldn't say afraid, Virginia. Afraid is something that you get very used to out here. You get nervous around different situations, and you get nervous in tight situations with animals, but I'm not afraid of any animal. I have huge respect though for elephants. You definitely have to know what you're doing around elephants. And I don't pick up venomous snakes, so I'm not a person who catches venomous snakes easily. I'll definitely catch them with grab tongs, and in the instance of any of the spitting snakes out here with goggles on, but I'm not a big fan of catching venomous snakes with my hands. For the rest of it, you know, it depends on the situation. If you're in very thick bush and you're following up on some lion tracks or on some leopard tracks, the situation can get quite scary, but it's not that I'm nervous or afraid of much. Huge respect, not so much afraid. Yes? So Judith has asked a very good question about a symbiotic relationship between a honey badger and a honey guide, and is it really true that a honey guide will lead a honey badger to a beehive? And the answer to that question is yes. It's a funny relationship that is developed between two different species of animals. A honey guide, for those of you who don't know, is a bird species out here, and a honey badger is a tiny mammal, a carnivorous mammal at least anyway, very close to a badger, very close to a European badger. And the relationship, the symbiotic relationship that they have with one another is called mutualism. So there's a couple of different types of symbiosis, but this particular one, mutualism, is where both organisms benefit from the relationship with one another. The honey guide will lead the honey badger to the beehives, which are quite often in inaccessible places for the honey guide, inside trees or inside caves or inside cavities of some sort that the bird doesn't have the necessary tools to excavate. Honey badger comes along, excavates the beehive, will eat the honey and eat the larvae, and then the honey guide comes over and picks up the rest. So both the honey badger and the honey guide benefit from the relationship, the mutualistic relationship that they have with one another. They are quite capable of foraging for their own food on their own, but definitely they have a special call, and if a honey badger is in the area, quite often they keyed into that call. Sounds like the rain is letting up. So Elizabeth has asked if, along with the honey badgers, we get skunks in this area. I'd say the closest thing to a skunk in this area would be a striped polecat. They're very rare to find in the Sabi Sand, but you do find them in grassier areas. I personally have only seen them on the high veld, not in the low veld. They're very rare. In a 16-year career, I've only seen one. I have got a case of books here next to me, and if you'll allow me a couple of seconds just to pick up a reference book, I'll show you what one looks like. Hello there. I'm just going to find one quickly in here for you. So this is like a field guide's Bible. It's called the Smithers, The Mammals of Southern African Sub-Region by Ray H.N. Smithers, and it's a fantastic book to have on hand, I must be honest with you. So, see if I can find you a picture of this guy. So, there's the honey badger we were talking about. And there is the striped polecat that is the closest to a skunk that we're talking about. So it looks quite similar. Those black and white markings on it are a very clear indication. It's a warning sign to other animals to say, don't come close to me, I'll do something to you. In the case of a honey badger, it's this naked aggression that they have. In the case of the striped polecat, it's a over-enlarged, very similar to a skunk, I suppose, an over-enlarged glands in their rectal area, and they can actually spray or paste out this noxious fluid that's a deterrent to predators that want to prey on them. You'll notice some of the more common animals around that you'd see on evening game drives are the two genet species that we have over here. Seeing a honey badger, although they're quite common, is quite rare to see in life. These guys don't occur in large numbers in the Kruger National Park, at least anyway. And then you have the civet, the African civet, a very common animal out here, also nocturnal, quite difficult to get on film, but something that we see quite commonly out here. So I hope that answers your question. Yes. So Ramey has asked if any predators will kill honey badgers, and absolutely. Out here everything is about who's the biggest bully on the block, and lions quite often, and leopards will quite often prey on honey badger, not for food, it's to eliminate competition for a similar resource. They all compete essentially for the same food or for the same energy availability out of the prey species that they have. And lion in particular, I've seen, will go out of their way to chase off and chase off and catch, at least anyway, any of the smaller cat species, including many of the smaller mammals as well that are in competition with them. Jackal, for instance, hyena, honey badger, all of them fall prey to lion. Leopard, of course, will also hunt honey badger. I have seen leopard feeding on honey badger. I have seen leopard feed on honey badger. But I think it's more just a competition that leads to a food source rather than a food source that's a prey item. So honey badgers are solitary. When a female comes into estrus, she also goes into a sort of pre-estrus, which is a very clear signal that she's going to be ovulating quite soon. Her body gives off a lot of signals chemically and through her displays. This then excites males, and she won't immediately ovulate. She will have a period before she ovulates, and what this does is it gives all the males in the area a chance to converge on her and to fight with one another for dominance, so that the best male, the male that can give her babies the best chance of success in life through being the strongest or the most adaptable or the cleverest in whatever sense you want to put that, in whatever mix you want to put that. And she will then have a litter. Generally speaking, she gives birth underground. And she gives birth to 1 to 6 little cubs. And once those cubs are a few days old, she will move them from den to den until they're a few weeks old. And then what happens is she will then bring them out of the den and they will begin foraging with her. Generally speaking, I've only seen honey badgers with 1, maybe 2 little cubs into adulthood. It's quite tough being a single mom out here in the bush. And quite often the mortality rate is quite high. You're looking at 80% on average. But it's the way that things are out here, and they are relatively common. I was asked if badgers are part of the weasel family, and yes, generally speaking, they are vivirid, and weasels are definitely part of the Viviridae family, and as are honey badger. Thanks, Marie, for that question. Oh, we have Mark that's come to join us. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Steph.
How are you?
Good, and you? Good. It's been good having you with us. I think
thank you.
it's been a great opportunity to learn from somebody as well. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark. It's great to be with you here this morning, albeit under the cover, but great because of finally we're getting a little bit of rain, and it's going to be a much easier dry season.
Sure, yeah.
Are you going to go?
See you in a bit.
Okay, thanks. Sorry to barge in. Hi, everyone. Well, we've all been hoping for a little bit of rain before the end of the dry season because, well, I think as it was standing before this lovely rain, it was going to be pretty harsh by the time the end of the dry season came towards the end of the year, around September, October, and that is always going to be hard on the animals. If this rain persists, and I hope that it does, only for the sake of the wildlife and the sake of the environment, then perhaps it'll ease things up a little bit towards the end of the year. I don't know if it's going to be enough to bring the rivers down in flood. I don't know if it'll be enough to fill up the dams, because as it is right now, it's a lovely slow soaking rain. So if anything, what it is doing is it's really feeding a lot of the plants, and it's going to give maybe a nice new flush of grass for the grazers, and maybe perk up a lot of the leaves, give a lot of moisture and nutrients back into some of the leaves that are still out there for the animals to browse on. It is new moon, we're going into new moon, so I guess in my calendar, no surprise that we're getting a little bit of rain. The last little bit of weather that came through was 2 weeks ago around full moon, and I like to keep note of these things because although there isn't really any scientific basis for weather over the moon cycles, I certainly think there is. Judy in California. Hi Judy, thanks for the question. Judy wants to know how much do we normally get in terms of rainfall. Annual rainfall in this part of the Sabi Sand is probably in the region of about 500 millimeters, 400 to 500 millimeters. Call it 220 inches maybe, if I do a rough conversion in my head. Further down south in the southern part of the Sabi Sand up to maybe 600 millimeters, and as you go further north going into Manyaleti and then into the Timbavati, that rainfall then drops down. Where I live up in the northern north of the Timbavati, we only get 200 to 300, if that, maybe half the annual rainfall that you get down here in the Sabi Sand, and that tends to dictate a very different habitat type. It tends to dictate a different collection of trees or diversity of trees, because there's some trees that are down here in the south that don't really do well in the drier conditions and vice versa. There's certainly trees up there that we don't get down here in the south, maybe because it can be a little bit too wet. But of course there are other factors that are involved. I mean, there are soil types and other things. But there is a very marked difference between the vegetation types as you go through different rainfall areas, and that does, I guess, stand to reason that the highest rainfall areas have the densest and lushest vegetation. I don't think though sorry. Ray, hi there. Wanting to know if elephants behave differently in the rain. Thanks, Ray, for the question. I think in some circumstances they do. Most of the time during the wet season when it rains, they're accustomed to the rain and they just carry on feeding and carrying on doing what they normally do. I think a rain like this might have changed things a little bit. It's been very, very dry. Elephants have been relying on smaller and smaller water holes. So I think from a point of view of just the relief of the rain, I think from that point of view, yes, they might behave somewhat differently. The only real way to do this, or to actually get an answer, would be to be observing elephants one day and then to see them the next day. You've got to remember that we have thousands and thousands of elephants here, and with all these elephants you will find a wide range of behavior when it rains. Some will be excited, some will ignore it, some might feel cold. There's no real way to know what the elephants are going to do until you're with them. What I can tell you though is and for those of you who were watching our Juma waterhole camera last night after the drive, sometime after the drive when the first lightning flashes came over, we had probably one of the most incredible light shows out here last night just before the rain hit. It was something that I haven't seen for many, many years. And of course that in itself starts, if you'll excuse the pun, it charges up the atmosphere a little bit. It charges energy in everything. Everything gets ready for a little bit of a storm, and it was really great that the storm did break, and it's great that it has still been raining all night. But I think it gets to a point like now in the morning where everything has been very, very wet all night, and temperatures are dropping fast, animals' coats are wet, and so from perhaps a relief point of view, when the rain first started falling after a rather hot day, to being cold, animals don't adjust to temperatures very well. So I think from that point of view, the behavior changes in that they'll seek shelter, they'll seek areas where they're going to get out of the wind. One of the reasons why, well, for the animals that chew the cud at least, they're able to go and lie down maybe in the drainage lines or in thicker bush and chew the cud. They don't have to carry on feeding on the trees. Elephants, on the other hand, constantly have to process their food, and so they're out feeding constantly, and they're going to still probably be in the rain. And that question, by the way, from Ray was sent in through Twitter, and if you want to tweet us, send a tweet. It's #SafariLive. But if you'd like to send us an email, it's questions@wildearth.tv, and we'll be looking forward to it. This is what we're going to be doing for the next while, so keep them flowing. Chris, hi Chris. Animals that come out in the rain that I'm looking forward to seeing. That's a very good question, Chris, because there have been animals that are normally out most of the summer months in the dampness and the humidity that comes with the rainy season that we haven't been seeing so much of in the last few weeks because it's been so dry despite having really warm temperatures. And I think two creatures that are very important to the environment, two creatures that I do look forward to, one of them is the millipedes, and I've already seen millipedes coming out this morning. In fact, during the night there were a lot of millipedes out, and we get many different species of millipedes, from tiny little ones that are like as thin as a thread and maybe only an inch long, to some of the really, really big fat black ones that maybe can be as thick as my fingers and 6 to 8 inches long. Millipedes are pretty important because they are detritus feeders. They are important in breaking down rotting and decaying matter. They do eat fresh food, they do eat fresh grasses or fresh vegetation, but primarily when things get wet, millipedes will be out to be feeding on mostly decaying matter, especially those little bits of gristle and meat and bone on the bones that are left by predators. There are certain arthropods or invertebrates that will come out. When I say that they're insects and millipedes and snails, the snail is the other one. The second I was thinking of was the giant African land snail, which was quite a remarkable creature. I'm expecting to see any number of them out on a day like today. Probably their last chance to feed before the dry season. Up until now they've been burrowed underground since the last rain, and they'll be coming out also trying to find something to feed on in these last moments of the wet season. This is going to be our last chance to see some of these arthropods, and so it's going to be great to have a look a little bit later if they're still going to be around. You know, everything has to be broken down. Everything has to be returned to the soil as trace elements, and because not any of the larger mammals, none of the larger creatures are able to get to the finer things, there are a lot of creatures that will come out for rotting vegetation and those little bits of flesh and gristle and cartilage that are left on carcasses. Not seeing any yet. Top 3 animals. Hi, Katrina. Wow, what a question. The top 3 animals I would like to see outside of Africa, outside of South Africa. Is it only 3, Katrina? Because I think I could think of quite a few. Snow leopard, a tiger, and the Amur leopard perhaps are the 3 cats. I suppose if I could broaden that to not only 3 animals, and so I think from that point of view I'd have to think of many different types of animals. Why would I want to see them? Also, I think if I'm sticking to cats, I would love to see a jaguar, I'd love to see a puma or a mountain lion. Why would I want to see them? I would want to see them firstly because they are other members of the cat family, and having studied lion, leopard and cheetah of the big cats for so long, having lived with them for so long, I'm intrigued how they live. The snow leopard, because it has managed to carve out a niche in an entirely hostile environment in the mountains and pretty snowy, cold conditions, they're still able to survive. The mountain lion, because it's the biggest cat in the Americas. The jaguar, because it's bigger than the leopard. And of course the tiger, well, because the tiger is the biggest cat. I think that's most certainly one of the reasons to see a tiger. I think if I have to think of continents, well, islands rather, island of Madagascar and the island of Australia, and then of course the Galapagos Islands are 3 islands. If I can expand that from 3 animals to 3 islands, and that is because these islands have a diversity of animals and a diversity of life that is unique and so endemic to those islands, because they've been separated from mainland for so long that what occurs in those islands occurs nowhere else on the planet. So I think from that point of view that the Galapagos are not going to be there forever. They're a declining wonder of the world, and just to see I've read a lot about island ecology, and there's a remarkable thing that happens on islands. There is a tendency for things to become giants and things to grow differently, to speciate differently, to do things different to the way things happen on mainland continents. And it's that adaptation to new lands, that speciation that occurs in places like that. The marsupials of Australia, I'm interested in. The lemurs and the baobabs in Madagascar. Why? Because they're so different to anything that I've seen here in Africa, and because for me, being a naturalist, it would be like visiting another planet. For me, everything will be full of wonder. Almost everything that I see will be absolutely wondrous. So it's a very, very exciting prospect, trying to contemplate going somewhere else to see some really wonderful creatures that I'll only ever see in film. Thanks, Katrina. Thank you for the question that came through on Twitter. I don't know whose water this is. I have a question about whether I've worked in any other countries in Africa. I have. The first country I went to from Africa, in fact I went there from the Sabi Sand. No, sorry, I'm wrong. I'm very wrong. I was working in the Timbavati at the time. I was running a lovely little camp in the Timbavati, and I had an opportunity to go up to the Okavango Delta. That was about 20-something years ago, 21 years ago. And my brother and I both went up to each manage 2 sister camps up in the Okavango Delta. It was an incredible eye-opener. For me also, the Okavango Delta, if I could just tell you, is the only inland delta in the world. It is the only delta in the middle of a desert that doesn't flow into the sea, and it also the fact that it is in one of the largest sand basins, the Kalahari Sand Basin, which extends all the way from Central Africa in the west all the way down into South Africa. So it's an exceptionally large sand basin, an exceptionally large desert. Of course, there is different rainfall occurring throughout that sand basin that even produces rainforest up in the northern parts, the northern stretches of the Kalahari Sand Basin, right down to true desert and salt pans down in Botswana going into South Africa. I didn't spend too much time in the Okavango. It is a water wonderland of note. Lions tend to swim across channels and across marshland to get to different islands. Elephants have water everywhere. The water is so clean because it is filtered through, I think it's something like 10,000 square miles of papyrus. You can literally put a glass over the side of the boat and drink the water straight out of the delta. It's a super water wonderland. After the delta and after a stint overseas, I moved up to Tanzania. I spent some time up in Tanzania in the Selous Game Reserve, which is one of the biggest game reserves on the planet. Very, very wild. It was in those days. It's about 3 times the size of the Kruger National Park, and the Kruger National Park, as you know, is a very big area. And the Selous was incredible in those days. The elephant population was recovering from a dramatic crash due to poaching in the 1980s and early 90s. And when I got there in the late 90s, the mid to late 90s, the population was recovering nicely. The elephants were becoming a lot more habituated. I remember first seeing some herds of elephant that were still very, very aggressive or very, very afraid of humans. And over time, slowly but surely, got them quite relaxed with us in the vehicles. Sadly, however, the Selous is probably one of the major areas for elephant poaching at the moment, and I think anything from 30 to 40 elephants per day are being taken out of Selous for their tusks, and the population is crashing. We're reaching a point now in our existence on this planet as human beings that we are causing irreversible damage to our planet, and elephant populations are unable to sustain themselves at the current rate because the death rate far exceeds the birth rate. Other places in Tanzania over time that I've worked have been the Tarangire National Park, which is another fantastic elephant national park that's further up north in the country. It is phenomenal. I've done walks amongst several thousand elephants over floodplains where you just, what looks like herds and herds of buffalo are just hundreds if not thousands of elephants. And as far as I've visited other areas of Tanzania, and then I've worked in a couple of places up in Kenya. One of the places that I worked up in Kenya is the same place that Scott worked. It's a place called Oldonyawua, so in the Chulu Hills. The Chulu Hills are an area of Maasai land in the southeastern part of Kenya, not very far from the Amboseli National Park, overlooking the beautiful Mount Kilimanjaro in northern Tanzania. A lot of people think that Kilimanjaro is actually in Kenya, but it is not. Believe it or not, the boundary sort of wraps around Kilimanjaro to include it in Tanzania. It was a gift, evidently, I'm trying to think who it was a gift to. It was a German lady. I'll think of it out of my head at the moment. Also in Kenya, I've been up in Meru National Park, which is up in the northeast near Mount Kenya. Quite also a beautiful reserve for elephant, but not a very well-traveled reserve, so the animals are very, very shy. I think one of the most incredible things I saw in Meru National Park were the Grevy's zebra, one of the only places that one can get to see Grevy's zebra. It's a different species of zebra to the plain zebra, much smaller but very big ears, very tight stripes, very narrow stripes, very interesting animals to look at. And that's about it for my work experience here in Africa. I have visited, I spent time in the Masai Mara, which is the Kenyan side of the Serengeti. Serengeti is down south in Tanzania, although it's one ecosystem. They're just two different names for the same place. Hi, Clancy. Very interesting question from Clancy in Ohio. Clancy wants to know, with my experience in the bush, having lived in it for some time, what is my opinion? What is my gut feel about the dry season, the coming dry season? Clancy, I think this dry season is going to be fine. We're likely to head into a drought, but we won't know until we see what next year's rainfall is going to bring, because of course it's next year's rainfall that'll determine whether we go into a drought or not. I mean, this rain is certainly going to help, make no mistake. It's going to certainly help with seeing things through the dry season to the next wet season. But unless we get early rains, or unless we get good rains between September and November next year, there's no real way of knowing. My gut feel is that we're in a bit of trouble. This season has seen a dramatic drop in many plant species, not flowering, not seeding. The grasses that have seeded, which have seeded by now, are likely to be sprouting from this rain, and it's going to be a big wait and see to see whether these grasses that are going to start greening up after this rain, whether they're going to reach full maturity to produce flower heads and then once again seed. But there's still a fair amount of grazing and a fair amount of browse that will keep the animals going through the dry season. But it's all going to hinge on what happens in next year, or this next coming wet season, that whether we're going to have rain or not, because that'll be the big telltale. It's getting a bit wet. Morning, Simon. Well, Simon's actually in Australia, and Simon, so good afternoon to you, Simon. Nice to hear from you, and great to hear from Australia. Simon wants to know if this rain is going to wash away a lot of the scent on the trees. You know, the way leopard and lion scent mark. It does wash some of it away, Simon, but the olfactory sense, the sense of smell of these animals is so acute that they will still be able to send lingering scents. I think if you read about how dogs can follow the scent of something no matter what the weather is, no matter how much rain has fallen, I think we can expand on that, and we can tell that there are many, many animals out here that have a pretty good sense of smell. And when it comes to things like the leopard and lion, who are so dependent on scents and so dependent on territorial markings, I think from that aspect there will still be the lingering smells that are available, but it will no doubt prompt a lot of these animals to be out, as when this rain stops, to be out remarking their territories and re-establishing their boundaries. So there certainly will be. Unfortunately, we as humans don't have such a great sense of smell at all. We're lucky if we can occasionally pick up something like the so-called popcorn smell of a leopard scent marking. Morning, Donna. How are you today? Donna wants to know if Gurry Dam dries up, will we use the muck as fertilizer? No, one can't really fiddle with that, Donna. That sediment that is left in the dam is crucial to the ongoing life cycles of many different species of creatures that live in the water. So many things that can lay eggs and become dormant during the dry season, and they will then emerge when the next wet season comes along and the dam fills up. And one of the only ways for life to emerge is this cycle of drying up and rehydrating after time. There's some fish species whose eggs can remain dormant. There are certain crustacean species and certainly a lot of insect life that lives in the water, and they all, if not burrow into the mud and create caverns like frogs and some of the catfish, and there are even fish called lungfish that are able to do this. To use that sediment will, firstly, it's going to take away a lot of that life that should be living in the water when it comes back. There are also certain mollusks that live in the water too, freshwater mussels, freshwater snails, and all of these things are crucial in maintaining a healthy environment in the water. So to take that out would be detrimental to the biodiversity of aquatic life that should live there. But also, the sediment that remains is also a waterproofing for the dam, and to take it out and to use it would actually be possibly creating a leak in the dam that it will then no longer hold water. I've seen dams where that has happened, people thinking that they can take that sediment because it's rich and use it to fertilize areas or to use it in areas. But unfortunately, if you get through the clay base, if you do happen to damage the base of the dam, you can end up having to spend a lot of money to re-waterproof it using a substance called bentonite, perhaps, which is a clay powder. But it's a very costly process, a very intense process to once again establish a dam once you've damaged its waterproof layer. What spider was here? Sorry. Morning, Blair. Nice to hear from you. And Blair, actually, also maybe not morning, but Blair, I think, is New Zealand, and so afternoon, evening to Blair. Has the Matimba male mated with the Styx female yet? I personally don't know. I need to chat to both guys that were out yesterday to find. We know that they were at the sighting, but I'm not too sure if they've actually done the deed. If we haven't got it on camera, then none of us have seen it, so we wouldn't really know. But we will certainly find out in the course of the day today, chatting to other guides perhaps. I'm not even sure where they are, the two cats at the moment, but certainly something to look forward to for this afternoon's drive if the weather holds up. We're going down to see if they are still together, to see whether she's been more receptive than she has been when we first started watching her. But great that you asked the question, Blair, because this is the continuity that we like. We like to be able to answer our own questions, because without being there, without witnessing these things, sometimes we will never know the answers to them. And I hope that we're going to get the chance later on this afternoon. Good. Lions tend to mate over a period of time. It's not just a once-off thing, and that's mostly because the lioness doesn't conceive every time a male covers her. In fact, if you had to watch lion mating over a consistent period of time, you'll notice that often there isn't even penetration, so there isn't even a chance of conception. Lionesses are what we call induced ovulators. They require a certain action to be able to ovulate, and as a result of that, their estrus period lasts for quite a long time, and it requires constant mating over that period of time, and you might find that over several days the male will cover her possibly every 20 to 30 minutes. There's no real time frame. They don't carry watches, but you could guess or average at about 20 to 30 minutes every time he covers her. When she's ready, she'll encourage him to mate. It's usually the female that encourages the male. Quite often when he tries, as we've seen with her, she rejects him. It's got to be when she's ready. Now there is on all cats really, there's a barb on the penis that when he withdraws, if he does penetrate, when he withdraws his penis, it causes a little bit of pain in the female, and that's what induces the ovulation. And you'll often find that a lioness, once he's withdrawn, will immediately lie on her back, and supposedly that's allowing fertilization to take place. She's also going to ovulate several times because she's going to need to produce several cubs. So hopefully, in some cases, you get more than one male mating with her to increase the chances of a stronger gene pool if they're two brothers. I think with these two, though, I think only the one will probably mate. I don't think he'll let his brother near her. Scotty's got a present for me.
Now, I'm not giving it to you yet, Marcus. This is one of my favorite parts of the day, and it almost does happen daily that I find a little bug crawling around of any sort, and Mark is an absolute wizard when it comes to the smaller animals. So I come up like a little kid, and Mark then tells us about it. So we're all very lucky to have him around, and I heard him speaking about millipedes earlier, and we have found one.
Wow. Wake up, child. I'm not too sure how close you can get and whether you can see it, but the millipede is very different to a centipede in that it has a very round body, and the legs come out at the bottom of the animal. It is a very, very hard shell that it has. Each segment has got two pairs of legs that come out of each segment at the bottom of the body. Tell me if it's going out of frame. Okay, looking good. You can see it's got two feelers in the front that are very, very sensitive. Give it a bit of scale there on my finger. This is a relatively small one, also a relatively short one. So the number of legs, we would have to count each segment and multiply it by 4, because there are 4 legs in each segment, 2 pairs of legs per segment. Millipedes are not venomous. They cannot hurt you. However, they can be poisonous because millipedes carry a defensive substance. Basically, what they digest, they create this horrible dark brown liquid that does contain a cyanide type poison, and it can be somewhat distasteful to most things. There are very few animals that eat millipedes. One of them is the civet, and with a little bit of luck, after a rain like now that we have now, if we manage to find a civet midden, we'll be able to see the change in diet from day to day over the last few days alone, because jackalberry trees are starting to fruit, and when the jackalberry trees are fruiting, the civets are eating a lot of jackalberries and maybe even the torchwood fruits, and so their dung piles or their middens are full of the seeds and the remnants of these fruits. But in the summer months when the rains come out, they will spend a lot of time feeding on millipedes, and all you'll see are these millipede segments in their dung, amongst maybe some other odd dung beetles and the other insects that they might find. But they are quite fond of millipedes. I've also known plated lizards feed on millipedes. I don't know any birds that feed on millipedes. One interesting thing about millipedes is that this substance that they exude is used by certain primate species as sorry, I think we need to put it back in the rain. Scotty, can we put it back somewhere, please?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
No problem. I will put it back where I found it.
So, an interesting thing is that the substance that they exude has almost like a narcotic effect on these primates. And I've been through this a couple of times, and I keep reminding myself and revisiting the information, but I also keep forgetting. where it is and what monkey species they are. It might even be a lemur. I think it is a lemur in Madagascar. They rub the millipedes all over themselves, and it actually acts as an insecticide or a means to keep parasites off of their bodies. But it does, the fumes that it produces does make them a little bit intoxicated. And I don't know how true that is. I have seen film on it, and of course you never know how things are edited. But it is something to look into further. Now the other animal that gets confused with the millipede is a centipede, and the centipede is a completely different creature entirely. It is a carnivorous creature, it is a hunter. It is a very flat and soft-bodied creature that only has one pair of legs for each segment. Each pair of legs comes out the side of the segment, and it has a modified pair of legs as the first pair of legs just under the head that look like two very sharp and black claws, which are linked to venom ducts, and they are like little hypodermic needles that produce I think predominantly a neurotoxic venom to subdue their prey. I haven't seen many centipedes hunting. It's not very easy to do so. They move very fast. They're mostly nocturnal, in fact entirely nocturnal. But I have seen film of centipedes feeding on tarantula. I've seen centipede catching a small snake on film. So they are quite voracious hunters. And thanks for that, Scott. That was quite interesting. Morning, Anne. Nice to hear from you. Anne is in Canada, by the way. Nice to hear from Canada. Anne wants to know if we get bird spiders here. We have the equivalent of a tarantula. I think the tarantula is probably, the South American tarantula, excuse me, is probably the spider that is known as a bird-eating spider, or the bird spider. Our equivalent, which is very closely related to the tarantula, is the baboon spider. It is big, it's hairy, it can grow about the size of my hand. Big females. The males aren't as big as the females. They live in silk-lined burrows. They are not as venomous. Most of the baboon spider species that we have are not as venomous as some of the tarantulas, although we do have what we call the dwarf megalomorph, the dwarf baboon spider, which is of some significance to humans. Not exactly deadly, certainly not as bad as some of the venomous spiders. We only have, I think, maybe 4 venomous spiders in the country. Of all the spiders that we do get, there are only 4 that are of considerable medical importance to us, and the dwarf baboon spider doesn't really fall into that category. It probably can be very, very painful. The other spiders, of course, have other venoms that we need to be very careful of. Oops, sorry. What? Have I ever been bitten by any poisonous spiders? Sarah, not poisonous, venomous. I need to emphasize that when we're talking about poisonous things, plants can be poisonous, millipedes can be poisonous because they have a toxin. But things that bite are going to be venomous, not necessarily poisonous. Poison is something you ingest, venom is something that is injected. So you could actually eat venom, because most venom is a protein. But anyway, Sarah was asking if I've ever been bitten by a venomous spider. I have. I've had the unfortunate experience of having squashed a sac spider against my skin and having had to deal with the resultant wound, cytotoxic venom, which means that it causes necrosis, it causes tissue destruction, and that kind of a wound can last for anywhere up to 3 to 5 months, and it can continue to get worse and worse. It's a very difficult bite, a very difficult thing to keep under control, the tissue that gets destroyed. The only time that one is really going to be bitten by one of these spiders is if you squash it against the skin, because most of these, of the 4 spiders that are of significant importance to us, are a type of spider whose fangs, whose chelicerae, cannot really open wide enough to be able to get purchase on our skin, and the only time that these spiders do bite is when they're accidentally pressed against the skin, and mostly because people react the way they do. They brush them off, and spiders are very, very sensitive creatures. They have hairs all over their body that are shaped differently, some of them that are set in depressed little conical depressions. Some of their hairs are hollow. The hollow hairs are hairs that are able to pick up chemical changes in the air. Some of the hairs that are set in little conical depressions are like little satellite dishes that pick up any vibration in the air. So when you're reacting to a spider on your body, before your hand even gets to the spider is sensing danger and it is already getting ready to defend itself. So when it gets squashed against the skin is when they mostly bite.
Hey Mark.
Good, and you, Steph?
Good, you're astounding me with your knowledge today. It's awesome. And we've got a little visitor. I see he's just walked in from outside.
Oh wow.
So before we take him into the bush, I thought that you might like to just do a quick show and tell.
Okay, but let's let him come into frame.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you, have you been bitten by a venomous spider?
Yeah, I can actually show you the...
Are we going to do the starting?
Yeah, so that's a sack spider bite.
Okay.
I don't know if you can focus on it. He walked up she walked up my bed, and my feet were hanging off my bed, and I must have just kicked it, and she bit me, and 6 months of
6 months, yeah.
of repair. Yeah, it's definitely.
Spiders can take
You
a
see
long.
it? Just get my leg up.
I'm not tall enough. Is it not coming? But
I'll quickly just.
Okay.
Looks like it just came out from under that wood pile over there. Obviously in response to the rain. Please go right ahead and...
Not very often. Once, I think because it is wet, this is another creature that's coming out in the rain. Also going to be maybe the last time that these beautiful little reptiles are able to feed for most of the dry season. They will be mostly sleeping during not really hibernating, but they'll mostly be dormant in the dry season. This is rather a rare species. Well, it used to be. I've funny enough been noticing more of these than the leopard tortoises this summer. But they have been an endangered species over time. What I want to show you quite interestingly, at the back of the carapace of this tortoise is a leathery hinge that allows for the back of the carapace a little bit of movement which facilitates mating. This one, if I can feel correctly, this is a male, because the plastron underneath, I don't want to turn it over, but the plastron underneath does feel a little bit concave, but also just the proximity of the carapace coming down over the plastron. Very afraid to be handled. This is the scoot, isn't it?
Yeah,
This is used for fighting, and some tortoises develop a very, very long scoot to be able to push their opponents over.
So if you'd like to take him back into the bush, I'm sure he doesn't want to be in the staff village over here with us, and I'll take over if you want.
Thanks,
And enjoy. I
while.
thought that you'd enjoy that.
Very much so.
Caught my eye as we walked in over here.
Bye everyone.
See
Keep it
you in
later.
a bit. I'm back, everyone, and it's amazing to listen to Mark. I was just standing in the background and listening to him. He's definitely got an encyclopedic knowledge. Yes. So Sandy has asked if heavy rain affects spider webs. Not really. Definitely hail. I've seen hail knock spiders out of trees, and I've seen hail knock spider webs down. But spiders generally out here in the bush are geared for their webs to be disturbed. Birds fly through spider webs quite often, and you find large insects, big grasshoppers, even bats will fly straight through spider webs, and all the spider does is get right onto a repair quite quickly. Even the most elaborate webs, the orb webs out here, don't take much more than an hour to construct. Some spiders, even like your bark spiders, will actually spin a brand new web every single night. During the day, they against the tree bark, it's where they get their name from. In the evening, they come and they spin their massive, complex orb webs. And at the end of the evening, when the sun starts coming up, they snip their web, they collect it all, they eat it again, and then they go back to their tree branch and they go and lie up for the day. Interestingly, spiders spin, or are able to spin, about 7 different types of silk. The silk is produced from a gland. It's liquid, and on contact with air, the silk then hardens. And it's made of many different fibers, almost similar to a rope. And that rope is then twisted. It almost looks like a rope that you'd go and buy from a shop. Many different strands together, twisted into a cable. And then these 7 different types of silk that spiders produce, not all spiders produce all 7 types of silk. The orb-web spiders, they produce all 7 types of silk. But some of your more primitive spiders, for instance, your big baboon spiders or that wolf spider we had down here, might only produce 3 or 4 different types of silk. But what's interesting is they can combine these different types of silk into an absolutely uncountable variety of different functions and forms. You get silk strands that are incredibly strong and used for anchoring. You get very fine, very sticky silk strands. You even get some spiders that can spin a liquid drop of silk and they attach it to a thread at the end of their legs, and they can actually swing it in a circle and catch moths, believe it or not. So definitely rain does nothing to spiders and to spider silk, and if anything it announces a new flush of insects. So thank you very much, Marianne, in Boston for sending through that. So what we're going to do, it was quite interesting to see that tortoise to come out in the rain. Now tortoises actually well, we won't see tortoises again probably until about November when the first rains come out. They definitely lose moisture during the dry period. It doesn't get very cold here, and so tortoises effectively, even though they are arid specialists, here will go into hibernation in holes in the ground and in rotting stumps and in fallen down tree trunks, and they will then spend the winter hibernating using their reserves of water and food. And I've got a funny feeling that little tortoise that wandered in here from the road, across the road, was literally just looking for a puddle to refill their bursa, and then from there he will go and find a place to go back to his original hole. I see Mark has put him back exactly. We could actually see his tracks coming across the road there, and Mark is going to go and put him back where he came from, which was quite nice. So I've actually got a branch here that I decided to bring with. This is from the magic guari tree. So its genus and species is Euclea divinorum, and it's called the divining tree because the older folk here used to not use scientific methods to divine for water. They used to use a forked stick, and this was one of the sticks that they used to divine for water. So they'd break off a branch like I have done, and then what they do is they clear off the fork, similar to what I'm doing here. Obviously a little bit of a bigger branch than this particular one. They would then snip the fork off, which is what I'm doing there. And then they'd hold it in a variety of different ways. That they'd hold the stick underhanded fashion and overhanded fashion. They tend to want to put a little bit of pressure on it. So what they do is they'd hold the stick similar to this, and then what would happen is they'd walk through the bush and the stick would bend down when they find water, and there was where you place your borehole, or there's where you place your drilling rig, so that you don't just drill willy-nilly all over the place. And I must be honest with you that the twice that I've had to drill boreholes and we've had a water diviner come and they've used their sticks, we've always found water there. So there's definitely something there that I don't understand. But another quite interesting use for this particular tree is it's got quite fibrous bark, and what you can do is peel it, like I'm peeling it there. You can cut off the top, you then crisscross it without cutting your finger off, hopefully. This tree, incidentally, also produces a fruit in December, which is highly prized by birds and by humans alike. It doesn't have a lot of flesh on it, but it's a fantastically refreshing stopover next to this tree, and the roots have a lot of tannin in them. Tannin is a compound that occurs naturally in the bush, and by beating this tannin out over pots of water, you could tan leather in similar pots, and the leftover water makes a fantastic brown dye that the local or the traditional use for is dyeing mats and dyeing baskets. So what I've done is I've selected my stick, I've crisscrossed it in the end. Now you chew it to separate the fibers, and I have a brush which can be used for your teeth. It leaves a few things between your teeth, but you can definitely use it for your teeth. You can also use it as a paintbrush, so you can use it to paint, you know, like a bushman used to do, painting caves. Makes a fantastic brush. So there you go, a little bit of bush lore that I've brought to the show today. So got a few questions coming in. You're welcome to ask any questions you like, and thank you very much. So Sam in Baltimore, excuse me. So Sam from Baltimore has asked, do hyena dens flood during the rain? And the answer to that question is yes, sometimes. Mostly hyenas will use excavated aardvark burrows for their den sites, and these are usually in raised areas, and termite mound is raised above the bush, and aardvarks usually go in from about a quarter of the way up at an angle down into the center of the termite area. During heavy rains, I have seen runoff from the termite mounds go into the dens, but never to flooding it to, you know, topping it up full. To do that, you'd need the den site to be next to a drainage line, or you'd need the den site to be on a riverbed. I've never seen a hyena den in any other place except for a termite mound or in some rocks in a rocky cave. So yes, a small amount of runoff will go into the termite mound or into the den site, but never really to the detriment of the adult hyenas. They'll move their cubs way before the termite mound fills up with water. Definitely a good question. I mean, we all worry about what happens to the little ones in dens. Yes. So Dennis has asked a question about hippo behavior, and I'm gathering, Dennis, that you asked this because we've seen some hippos on the Gowrie camera, and on the dam camera there's been a bull hippo that's moved into the dam, and he's taken up residency there over the last couple of days. Their behavior does change slightly depending on the amount of rain that's fallen. So hippo, they actually can't swim. Hippo walk on the bottom of rivers and on the bottom of pans, and strong currents will actually wash hippo away. So I've seen during the floods of the year 2000 and subsequent years where we've had quite a lot of rain, I've seen hippo leave river systems and move into dams and temporary pans to escape fast-flowing rivers. So their behavior there changes. Where you'd normally expect to find hippo, you all of a sudden don't find hippo because the current is too strong. And where you don't expect hippo, in the middle of the bush, in little pans that crop up, you find hippo, and sometimes two or three, groups of two or three, even lying up underneath bushes and things far from river systems. Now that's when it's very wet. When it's very dry, so lack of rain, hippo move incredible distances to go back to water. It's not uncommon for hippo to make migrations of 60 to 80 kilometers over a number of days. They'll move predominantly at night time. And that's because they are susceptible to dehydration and to sunburn. They don't have melanin in their skin, which allows UV rays to be absorbed before doing damage to tissue. So they do get sunburn. And I've seen them move so many kilometers to new water sources. So it just depends. Lack of rain and too much rain can have an effect on hippo behavior. So I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for sending your questions. We're having such a good time answering all of them. It's refreshing to do. So you're welcome. So Sibo in Pretoria, welcome to the show, has asked, do elephants dig graves for other elephants? And you know, this is a nice question to answer, because quite often you run up against folklore that, and all over the world, even in the mammoth fields in Russia, we're finding what people loosely term an elephant graveyard. So the short answer to your question is no, they don't dig graves for their relatives or for their herd members. What happens is, in this area at least anyway, as an elephant gets older, he loses the ability to chew very rough food. They only have a set number of teeth. We have two. We have our baby teeth or our milk teeth, and then we have our adult teeth or our mature teeth come through. Elephants have 6 sets. So when they finally used up their 6th set, which happens when they're around about 50 to 60 years old, you find groups of these older elephants frequenting areas where the vegetation is suitable for them. So where vegetation is very leafy and soft, and generally where this is in watery places, so swamps and river systems. As the elephants then pass on, they die of old age, you find collections of really big old elephants and their bones collecting in these areas which are susceptible to flooding. Flooding then collects these bones and deposits them in deposit beds. So you have this collection of bones in layers, you know, and these layers can be very thick depending on the river system that you're at. And when you start excavating these layers, so it'll either come about the river changes course, or it's dammed, or people actually mine these, you find that they find these collections of bones. And it looks like a graveyard was there, but it's actually just the way that the Mother Nature has provided us with an answer basically for what happens to old elephants. You hardly ever see old elephant, what happens to their bodies and what happens to their bones. And so definitely you have this loose term elephant graveyard, but now you know why at least. So Genevieve in New York has asked whether animals have the concept of their own reflections. Do animals see their reflections? Do they react to it, I suppose? Or would you be able to see an animal admiring itself in their reflection? The answer is I've never seen that, Genevieve. I've never seen an animal react to their own shadow or react to their own reflection. And I haven't seen an animal admiring themselves or their reflection in a pan of water or a pool of water. I'm not too sure if the same can be said for the more intelligent animals like dolphins or chimpanzees or baboons. Definitely not something that I've seen. So what I have seen is I have seen birds react to their reflection in glass, but that's really because that bird is seeing an opponent rather than itself, and is trying to fluff itself up, but definitely not admiring themselves. I see Brent has arrived over here with something from our camp. So hello, Brent.
Hello, Steve.
What he's holding is a buffalo skull, and it looks quite mangy because it's old.
It smells quite mangy.
So this is a decoration from our camp, and thanks Brent for bringing it. It's an old buffalo.
You go see what else I can find?
Thank you. You're going to leave it there with me. If I turn it, you'll be able to see the buffalo. It's an incredibly heavy thing. So these horns make it incredibly heavy, and that's because it needs to be heavy. Buffalo bulls fight with one another by bashing their horns together, and so their skulls are incredibly dense and thick and have these huge bosses, which is this area that you're seeing over here. Now what you would notice on it is all these funny protrusions. Now that is it's basically from a horn moth. It's where the caterpillar from the horn moth pupated out and the moth came out. So they are one of only 2 species of insect that can actually digest keratin, which is this. We have keratin in our fingernails and in our hair, and the horn moth caterpillar is one of the only species of insect that can digest keratin. And obviously Mother Nature doesn't want unused or difficult to digest things lying around in the bush. Can you imagine how much litter there would be lying around the bush? And this is just one of her little workers that helps break down these compounds and change them into something useful. So by that I mean the horn moth caterpillar will eat the keratin, will turn into a moth, and the moth will then get preyed upon by bats and by spiders and by other insects, and therefore fulfill this nutrient cycle that we're talking about. So you can see this is where the nose of the buffalo was, his soft tissue where the muzzle was, his 2 eyes there. You can see inside there the massive nasal cavity. That's why buffalo have such an amazing sense of smell. See inside there, I'm going to twist it slightly here. Bring it in here. Here's its palate, top of its mouth, the grinding teeth. You'll notice the ridges on the teeth. Now, that's to make the grass that they eat as small as possible. Buffalo are ruminants, and what that basically means is that they're quite good at taking nutrients out of grass. To do that, they've got to break it into the smallest possible pieces, which actually increases the surface area, increases the area that the bacteria in their tummy have to work on, and therefore makes it even better for them to extract the nutrients from what they eat. So nice flat ridged surfaces, their molars. Here is the attachment where his skull attaches to his spine, and you'll see that it's worn smooth. The axial and axis bones. And I'm going to see if I can show you where his brain is. So inside there is where his brain is. Buffalo have a brain probably just a little bit bigger than a golf ball, definitely just smaller than a tennis ball, to give you an idea of the buffalo's brain. And it sits behind this massive armor of bone. So the brain sits inside there, and I'm going to turn it slightly so that you can see where my hand is, how much bone is between the front of the head and the brain. And it's all massively dense and designed to take the shock of these impacts that the buffalo have with one another. You can hear it many hundreds of meters away when these buffalo bulls really have a go at one another. You can see that this was an old buffalo. His horns are not sharp. Buffalo have recurved horns, so he would have worn this part of his horn off over the years of wrestling with his friends and bumping heads and fighting with other males for dominance over females. So this is just our decoration that we've got in our staff village, and getting very heavy. I'm going to put it down. Yes. So I've just been asked if I've had any encounters with hippo that are dangerous, and I haven't had any dangerous encounters with hippo because I'm nervous around water bodies when I'm busy walking in the bush. I'm very aware of oxpeckers suddenly making noises around me, and I'm very aware of not walking on hippo paths. hippo have habits of walking in and out of bodies of water on the same path, and they use these what we call hippo runs religiously. And it's always the easiest thing to walk on one of these hippo paths around thick brush areas that surround bodies of water. But I make a point of crossing them and not walking on them, because hippo can come down these pathways like freight trains. If they're getting a fright somewhere in their feeding grounds, the safe place for them is the water, and they don't stop for anything on their way down to the water. So take over from me, and welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Steph.
See you again.
You too.
So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, and thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon, hopefully on Game Drive.
Thanks, Steph.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. And it's not our typical experience that we offer here, as you all know. If you are a first-time viewer, we're usually out and about exploring, but today we thankfully have this extra time to answer all of your questions. Now, because we're having such a good time answering all your questions this morning, we're going to actually extend the broadcast. So if you do have time and you don't have any other plans, stick around and keep the questions coming through either on Twitter at a hashtag Safari Live, or on email, questions@wildearth.email. Now, there's two reasons. It's not only the fact that we're enjoying your questions, but we really do hope to be able to head out there. It's not looking promising, but we are wanting to extend the broadcast in the hope that if the rain does subside, we'll be able to take you out and show you around. But either way, in the meantime, while we wait for the rain to hopefully stop, we can keep the questions coming through, please. We really appreciate it, all the questions. And I hope you've enjoyed your time with all the different presenters and hearing a few different angles or perspectives. So, in updates, and part of the reason why we would like to hopefully head out is because there's a message that we've got from the Game Drive vehicles that have headed out, and a male leopard who we do view on a fairly regular basis called Kunuma. He's just over 2 years old. He managed to make a kill last night. Now, that's very interesting because a lot of you actually asked what would the hunting conditions be like in the rain. And you can imagine being an impala in a huge thunderstorm. There's flashes of lights from the lightning, and what that will do is it'll initially light up the surroundings, but as soon as that flash of lightning disappears, the impala's eyes will have to readjust to the darkness, which they're not suited to do. It's the same as us walking into a dark room and flashing on a light on and off. You can all understand how it takes some time for your eyes to readjust. Now, the predators that are nocturnal like, or that have got great night vision like leopard, will be able to readjust their eyesight very quickly and be able to creep up to the impala. So it's a combination of the impala's visuals getting hampered from lightning, as well as the constant downpour of rain and thunder causing an audio impact. So they won't be able to hear the predator approaching. And I think that's why Kunuma got lucky. So very interesting, and good news for Kunuma, not good news for the female impala that is caught. But he has hoisted that kill up into a tree, and he's lying around somewhere nearby. He's not actually at the kill at the moment, but we hope to be able to head out and show you what we can later if the rain does stop. Now, something that you may be wondering about is, when there is lightning here, what are the chances of it causing a fire? And there is a strong chance, and it is natural for lightning to strike and cause fires, and it's also necessary for the vegetation and also the animals for these fires to occur. Initially, yes, it may be devastating to certain plants and animals, but what it does is it clears out the vegetation, that way making space for new growth, and that's critical out here. Once a lot of vegetation becomes old and dead and often inedible to certain animals, by it being burnt out, like I said, creates room for growth. And in my time in the Sabi Sands, just to give you a little bit of history about myself, I've worked here from the beginning of 2008 until the kind of end of 2011, and during that 3-year period I got lucky, I guess, in terms of the fires that we did experience, because it is incredible to witness these natural fires blazing through the wilderness. It can often be quite scary because all the guiding teams will head out and fight these fires to the best of our ability to try and prevent lodges being burnt down. We do want the fire to naturally burn through, but obviously there's a lot of lodges in this area and we don't want them to burn down. So it can be exciting and interesting times, and after the fires there's a huge surge in growth, and that surge in growth brings incredible life to the wilderness areas. So the chance of one happening now actually is quite decent, because the vegetation has become abnormally dry. We didn't have as much rain as we would have liked to in our rainy season. And what that means is that at the moment there's a large fuel load for a fire. The vegetation is very dry. And quite possibly in surrounding areas to us, a lightning strike may have started a fire. We haven't heard any reports, but the storm that we experienced last night, coinciding with this very dry time, is a good example of when lightning strikes can actually create fires. Now, just to go back to the story of this male leopard that made a kill last night, it's interesting to know that we get to know the leopards here and also other animals on sometimes an individual basis. You would have noticed that I said he's just over 2.5 years old, and what a privilege it is for all of us involved in this operation that we get to actually follow these animals who are naturally so shy and elusive, and we get an insight into their lives without interfering with their daily ongoings and being spoiled to actually see them doing their thing. Now, some of you may wonder, how has it got to that stage? How can leopards in some areas be very shy and nervous, whereas here we get to see them very relaxed with the vehicles? And the reason for that is the Sabi Sands Game Reserve, which we are part of here. It is open to the Kruger National Park, so we are open to a greater ecosystem, which is massive. It's bigger than Wales, the Kruger National Park, so it's bigger than some countries. And in the Sabi Sands specifically, there have been game drive safaris going on for over 50 years now, and the only weapon that people are armed with out here is a camera. So because we've spent such a long time as humans in and amongst these animals, not interfering on their daily ongoings, simply taking photos and looking at them, never feeding them, never harming them, they've slowly, very slowly become habituated to us. And the habituation process, some people may say, is negative, because the animals shouldn't become used to humans. They could pose a threat to us as humans, and it may deter or make it less likely that they'll be scared of us. And there are some humans that would like to harm animals. Thankfully everyone here doesn't, but habituation is critical. Like I say, this reserve has been going for over 50 years now as a safari destination, and as you can see, on certain occasions we get absolutely wonderful sightings, and it's the sightings of these animals and sharing it with people like you all around the world that helps to maintain and conserve these animals. If we didn't see them and they weren't used to us, how would we be able to share their beauty with you? We've just got another question coming through, and thanks again for your questions. And just to recap in the meantime, we are just going to be answering questions, but it seems like the rain is subsiding. Just got a question through from Nancy. Okay, Nancy, thanks so much for your question. And everybody, Nancy's interested to know that I mentioned that Kunuma is a young male leopard, just over 2 years of age now. What will happen to him when he becomes older? Will he move off? It's a great question, and there's not only Kunuma, there's also his brother, Quarantine. So it's two brothers of the same age, raised by a female leopard called Karula, who her territory encompasses the camp that we stay in here at the moment. Now, her two cubs, Quarantine and Kunuma, about 6 or 7 months ago, I would say, I wasn't here at the time, they were slowly kind of kicked out of home, you could call it. Their mother, Karula, her intentions were to now start focusing on raising the next litter. She has done her job, raised them to sub-adulthood, to a point where now they need to start surviving on their own and not relying on her to make kills. It can be related very, very much to us as humans, I guess. There comes a point in our life where it's time to move off, get a job and start looking after ourselves. And it's the same out here with the leopards. So even though they have been kicked out of home, they are still tolerated within her territory. So she doesn't mind them being there, but she just tries to avoid them because she knows that they're going to try and steal her kills. And she needs all that nutrition to help raise the next litter of cubs that we are thinking she is pregnant with at the moment. We've noticed a small little extra protrusion or bump on her belly, and we think that she could be pregnant. It's not confirmed. Anyway, so she's focusing on the next cubs. Now, what is going to happen to them? They will slowly start expanding their territory and explore, and the interesting thing about this is that there's no set rule. Now, their father still tolerates them, and they have been seen in sightings together quite recently. So he doesn't mind them, but it will get to a point when they start becoming more sexually inquisitive and start marking territory which is actually his territory. He'll start to chase them off. But that's probably going to happen in the next 6 months to a year. It'll be very interesting to follow, and we're certainly going to keep you updated on the movements of these leopards. Now, like I say, it does seem like the rain is subsiding. I'm just actually going to go out and stand outside and see how good it's looking, but there may be a chance that we can head out. It's certainly sounding better and looking better and feeling better, but there's still a little bit too much precipitation falling. But things are looking good for potentially heading out a bit later, so don't go anywhere. Now, there's been quite a few of you that are interested to know what I mean by habituation and the kind of comparison between habituation and tame. So tame would be an animal that is used to human interaction on kind of every level. So it's fair to say that, you know, dogs and cats that are domesticated, or even certain wild animals, may become tame and can interact with humans on any given scenario. Habituated simply means they have become accustomed to us. As I mentioned, we don't interfere, we don't feed them, we don't hurt them. We simply fit in as a neutral being. So to say that they're tame would not be true. If we got off the vehicle and walked up to them, yes, they may run away, but there's also a strong chance that they could charge us and attack us if they feel nervous. So I think a good word to use is accustomed to us. They are used to our presence, they're used to the vehicles, the sound of the vehicles, the presence of vehicles. However, when we are off on foot and we are therefore quieter, and there's a stronger chance that we may surprise animals, that could obviously scare them. And when any animal's scared, human or wild animal, we could make a decision to run away or to fight for our lives. So that, I think, is the difference between tame and habituated. These animals are not tame, they're just used to us. Now, just to let everyone know, we are going to keep answering questions for a few more minutes, but what's going to happen is Brent's going to head out in the other vehicle shortly, and they're going to go and have a look for Kunuma, this male leopard, and hopefully be able to find him. He isn't in the exact area where he's made the kill, and you may be wondering, why has he left the kill? Leopards have the benefit of the fact that they can, but they don't always. They can hoist their kill up a tree. Now, if they're clever enough to do that, what that means is it lessens the likelihood of another predator coming in and stealing it. Now, theft out here is a reality, and there's a hierarchy between the predators. Lion in this area are the strongest predator. For a number of reasons, they are individually very large, but they also often live together in prides. Now, alone and in prides. They are big and strong. And an animal like a leopard would have no chance in defending its kill against them. A leopard would also have very little chance of defending its kill against hyena, which are of a similar size to leopard, but again, can join up and come together in a clan, so 3 or 4 hyena could arrive. Now, the good thing is, lion are not good climbers, and hyenas cannot climb at all. So the fact that the leopard's got the kill up in the tree means that it's relatively safe there. There's a chance that certain lion may be able to try and climb up the tree, depending on what type of tree it is. But he's got nothing to worry about, and he's probably gone to get somewhere comfortable, walk around, maybe warm up after all this rain, and maybe even head over to have something to drink. He wouldn't have had to go far to have a drink, and that certainly bodes well in the likelihood of Brent and the other guides going out to go and look for him now. So good prospects. Again, I'm going to reiterate, there's a fairly strong chance we're going to be able to head out. The rain has finally subsided, and isn't that good news? If all of you, for those of you who have hung around, your patience may well pay off. So that's great news, and you will hear the engine starting up now. We are deploying the team to go and find Kunyuma. So some exciting prospects, and we really do want to head out there and show you. So that is why we've extended this broadcast, as well as the fact that they are now sneaking out as stealthily as possible in a large diesel vehicle, and they can give us a wave as they go by. Good luck, guys. And I'm really happy you got to see them on that vehicle, because that's a different vehicle to what we're operating in here. You would have noticed that there was a chair that Stefan was sitting in on the hood of the car. Now, it is strange, but normal out here. So this chair is called a tracker seat. Now, when you come on safari, a lot of the camps you come to within South Africa in this area will have a guide and tracker team combination. So the guide will drive and chat to the guests, while the tracker can sit up front, keep an eye on the road, and that way be able to easily see what's been laid down on the bush news from the night before, or whenever animals walk on any of the pathways or road, it leaves a trail of information for us. This morning, the bush news would have maybe been reset to 0, so all the rain would have washed away old information, which obviously means if anything has passed here before the rain, we may not know about it now because the tracks have been washed away. But on the flip side, the benefit is, now that they're looking for this leopard, if they do find any tracks, they're going to know they're very fresh because they haven't been washed away yet. So it does help in tracking down animals, and let's wish them luck. And both Steph and Brent are certainly seasoned veterans when it comes to tracking down leopards, and it's interesting when tracking animals. It's an incredible skill that gets passed down from generation to generation, and it's something that a lot can be learnt about around the fire, telling stories, and these are all the kind of things we do out here between drives and after drives, as we share information and share secrets and share behavior that we've learnt over the years. And Stefan and Brent, as well as Mark and myself, have all worked in Sabi Sands for a long time, and the reason why that is important or pertinent to what I'm getting to is the fact that leopard are high in density here, and therefore allow us to practice tracking them. Because there's a lot of them here, we get to practice tracking them, and you may find specialists from other areas coming here and not necessarily knowing how to track a leopard well, but knowing how to track another animal. So it certainly does help to know an individual animal and work out, kind of have a rough idea in your mind what they may do. So when you're tracking them down, you can almost slip into the mind of a leopard and imagine that if you were a leopard, what would you be doing and where would you be going? So that's what they're doing. They've slipped into leopard mode, and hopefully they're going to find him shortly. Now, again, just to recap, there's a lot of new viewers joining in, so obviously you're enjoying the question and answer session, and thanks for joining in a bit extra over the extra time today, and more importantly, thanks so much for sending through your questions. We're having a great time answering them. To send through questions, it's very simple. You would hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or send an email through to questions@wildearth.tv. I'm just going to head out again to check how we're doing with the moisture coming down from the sky. Okay, we're going to give it a few more minutes before we make a decision, but what I can assure you is that in a while, once the rain has potentially subsided, I went out there just to feel how heavy it was, and it's a light rain. What it would mean, though, is that we would be able to drive out, but we may need to wipe the lens occasionally, which will be worthwhile in order to get the pictures through to you. So occasionally we may need to wipe the screen, but because there's some action nearby, hopefully we won't have to drive too far, and I'm confident that we are going to head out in about 5 or 10 minutes. So we're not going to rush off, but we've got another question coming through in the meantime. Okay, well, good morning, Doris, and welcome to the question and answers here in our shelter from the rain. Doris is interested to know whether the rain that we've experienced over the last kind of coming on 12 hours now, is it going to have an impact on the growth of vegetation? Without a doubt. There's been a considerable downpour, and I'm confident that within a day or two, we are even going to start noticing fresh green shoots of grass popping up, and in the coming days, you will certainly see a notable change in the vegetation. I think a lot of the trees that are beginning to drag and wilt are also going to spring up and come to life as they get charged up with this life-giving water. So we certainly are going to enjoy seeing this change and have all been hoping for it. We certainly didn't expect it, and an interesting story about last night before the rain come, and we must give credit to our latest top weatherman here in the WildEarth crew, and Brent is going to be from now on regarded as the official rain man, because last night we were all sitting around the fire and Brent said to me, "Scott, what do you think about this weather?" Because he felt that there had been a little bit of wind and then it went absolutely dead still, and as it calmed down, he said, this is the eye of the storm that we're in. And I actually stopped and told everyone around the fire, well, everyone, what are your predictions? Is it going to rain? So we had a little bit of a debate. Shortly after that dead calm period with no wind, all of a sudden strong winds started gusting through, and then that was a sign that we were about to actually receive the storm. We also saw lightning off in the distance, but that strong wind that we felt before the rain came down was really exciting, and within a few minutes the heavens opened and we all ran for shelter with our plates of food to finish off dinner. We eat outdoors, so a huge privilege. And oh, there's a squirrel. And that squirrel was running off with its breakfast. You may have noticed it had a small little nut in its mouth, and that was the seed or nut from a marula tree. Now, the marula tree is an iconic tree of Africa, and specifically this area, for a number of reasons. The reasons why I personally love marula trees is that leopards love them. Now, the majority of trees that we will be able to show you leopards in will be the marula tree. And the reason why the leopards love these trees is because they've got thick trunks which are easy to clamber up for the leopard initially. And then once they spread out into the canopy, these branches will be horizontal, almost perfectly horizontal, and also quite thick and essentially comfortable for a leopard to lie on. So that little squirrel was running off with the seed. The fruit would have been eaten off by other animals. It's got a thin, fruity flesh layer that actually is very high in vitamin C, and we ate a fair share during the summer. They're really sweet and tasty. But that seed now has been lying dormant, and possibly the squirrel had dug through some elephant dung. So that seed may have passed through an elephant's stomach. There's some hornbills calling. The birds are getting excited on the squirrel's back, shaking the rain off its coat as it goes. And what I'm guessing has happened here is we saw it running off in one direction with the nut in its mouth. Now it'll break into that nut, and within there you get a nut of the seed rather. You get a nut that tastes and has a similar texture to a macadamia nut. So rich and oily, but quite small and very difficult for us as humans to get into. The squirrel with its little teeth though can remove a cap and get access to that nut. We'll see if it runs back with another nut, because I think it's trying to store up a larder. It may be have a home in a cavity in a tree nearby, and it will ferry these nuts backwards and forwards and start filling up its pantry. So we may see it running back again with another nut, but we'll keep an eye on that. Now, I got so excited earlier because I was hoping, or the rain was subsiding, but now it has just increased a little bit. So we're going to bunker down here for a few more minutes, but there is a chance that it will subside. Go. Okay, I just got an update through from the final control room, and they've told me that Brent is out with Steph, still searching. They haven't had any updates, so I guess that's good news in a way, because imagine if they had found the leopard but we couldn't go there. So they're still searching around, but have yet to find the leopard. They know where the kill is in the tree, so good prospects. If not for now, certainly this afternoon it's almost guaranteed that you can all be looking at a leopard. So that's something to look forward to later. Again, just to recap, we are just doing a question and answers. We have extended the broadcast because we've enjoyed this time being able to answer some of the different questions that may not necessarily be relevant to what we're seeing, what may be going on right now. And a lot of you have been sending through questions. I've just got another update through from the final control. Interested to know where else I've worked in Africa. I mentioned that I worked in the Sabi Sands for 3.5 years at a lodge in the southern Sabi Sands. And just to give you an idea of the size of the Sabi Sands, it's 65,000 hectares, and within that 65,000 hectares there's about 17 or 18 different lodges, so many different camps where people can work here. And I was based at one on the south of the Sand River. And after spending 3.5 years here, I thought, let me go out and see what else there is to explore in Africa. There's so many different wilderness destinations within South Africa, and then the other African countries, Botswana, Namibia, Mozambique, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. So I decided to head up to East Africa, to Kenya and Tanzania, where I continued to explore and learn about the bush. And what I loved about going up there is that we would see so many different birds and mammals that wouldn't occur here. So to see new animals, new vegetation, new terrain is always very stimulating. And I spent 2 years up in East Africa, and at the end of, or kind of midway through last year, I returned to South Africa. It was time to come home, and didn't I get lucky ending up with this job? I certainly feel privileged to be here and to be sharing the wonderful experiences that we do get to share with you. Usually we are not standing here answering questions, we are out exploring, and we've been so lucky, especially over the last few weeks. We've been having some incredible game viewing, and just the fact that we know there's a leopard nearby with the kill is testimony to that. Got another question coming through. Okay, well, we've got a question, the same question that's come through from Lewis as well as Cindy. So Lewis and Cindy, welcome and good morning. And they're interested to know where are we exactly, where is our camp in relation to here. And basically, where I'm standing, we've got 3 parking bays where we keep our game viewing vehicles, or our broadcasting vehicles. And then directly behind us, not very far at all, about 40 feet, is our accommodation. So there's 10 rooms here where, depending on how many people are in camp, we all stay. We've got a chef and a kitchen and a fireplace, and it's a really, really beautiful campsite with actually a marula tree that we were speaking about earlier growing right in the center, bringing us some shade, and also a great place for birds to come and land. So we've got a lot of life in and around the camp, and it was just about a week ago or two that Brent was in his room and he heard a squirrel alarm calling. Now, the squirrels that we saw earlier are hugely important for us because they're great to look at, but they also help us to find animals like leopard. And Brent was lying in bed reading a book and he heard the squirrel start alarm calling. And he thought, oh, let me just have a look out my window and see what it's alarm calling at. And would you believe it, the quarantine male walked right past Brent's room. So we are in the thick of things. We've got a fence that you can see behind us, but other than that, animals can move around the perimeter of our accommodation, and it really is exciting being here. Another question. Okay, got a question through from Kristen all the way in Denmark. Good morning and welcome. Now, for those of you who have been following the drives, you may have noticed that one of the young male leopards, Quarantine, now he's the brother of the leopard that's made the kill that we're hoping to see at some stage today, maybe not this morning, but certainly this afternoon if the rain subsides. Now, it's interesting because Quarantine is hungry. He has been seen a few days ago and he's looking quite thin, especially compared to his brother. And it's interesting to note that it does appear that Kunyuma, the one brother, is a better hunter than Quarantine. Maybe it's simply luck, but we are concerned to a very slight degree for Quarantine because he is a little bit thin. It happens often with animals that they will go through stages where they may lose condition, but they're incredibly tough, and he is anywhere close to, being at a fatal stage of hunger. So I certainly don't think there's anything to worry about, but it is interesting to note that he certainly is a little bit more hungry. Thinking back to the points of Kunyuma, the one leopard, his brother being a better hunter than Quarantine, it brings me back to a sighting we had not long ago where we were watching Quarantine lying up at a waterhole, and there were some birds called hardy-dar ibis that were feeding along the edge of the water. Now, leopards will ideally hunt larger prey like impala or duiker that they can get a lot of meat from, but they are opportunistic and are known to catch birds and lizards, even squirrels. Just about anything they can catch, they will eat. So that's important to know. And these hardy-dar ibis actually presented a great opportunity for him to stalk them and potentially try and catch one. There was a lot of cover that he could have used and ambushed them, but instead he actually ran up to them in the open, and that indicated to me that he still has a lot to learn. But like I say, he can still make kills, and at nighttime under cover of darkness or in a rainstorm, for example, like last night, he could well have got lucky because the odds would have tilted in his favor with better hunting conditions. Another question. Okay, now I guess the talk of Karula, the female leopard that we see, and the likelihood of her being pregnant has led to Valerie's question. Now, thanks for sending this question through, Valerie. And Valerie is interested to know, what are the mating habits of leopard, and have I ever seen leopard mating? Well, yes, I have on a number of occasions, and it's always been in the Sabi Sands, and that's important to know and important to emphasize how fortunate we are with specifically leopard viewing, along with a lot of the other animals, but specifically leopard, we get incredible insights into their lives. Now, the leopard, when they mate, will provide us with great entertainment and action. As you would have heard Mark speaking about earlier, and if you only tuned in, I'll recap. Mark was speaking about lions mating, and cats have got a barbed penis, so basically it's painful for both of them when they are undergoing the act of mating. And this pain will help induce the leopardess to come into ovulation, but it will also create a lot of pain and therefore anger between them. So it's a perfect example of an extreme love-hate relationship, because they literally go from making love as he dismounts, they growl and roar and hit one another because it's painful for both of them. So it's an incredible spectacle to behold. And what I'll even think of doing is I'll get out a picture quickly here to give you an idea of what it looks like and how they do growl at one another. It'll just take 1 second. Where are we going here? So Elizabeth in Minnesota, good morning and welcome on board. Elizabeth is interested to know whether we know who Karula's potential new lover may be, who may be the father of her next litter. We're not entirely sure. Nobody actually saw them mating on this specific occurrence, but we are fairly certain that she is pregnant. Again, it's speculation, it's not guaranteed. We can speculate as to who the father of the future cubs could be. In all likelihood, it would be Mvula. Now, Mvula is a beautiful dominant male leopard whose territory encompasses her territory. So with leopards, the males will have a much bigger territory than the females, and depending on how successful the male is, he may have up to 5 or 6 females within his territory. Now, failing Mvula being the father, Tingana is another dominant male leopard further to the west, and he spends more time on Arathusa Private Game Reserve, whereas here on Djuma Private Game Reserve that borders Arathusa, we get to see Mvula. Now, the great thing is we've got access to both of those wonderful lodges, properties, and we do see both, and it would be a competition between those two for Karula. Again, we're not sure who exactly it could have been. Who knows? Maybe there was another male leopard in the area that could have also snuck in. It's not uncommon for males to be attracted to females in season and fight over them. So that's something that could have happened. Now, let me see if I can find you this picture of leopards mating, because it really will give you a good idea as to the intensity and the ferocity of this act. Now, just to elaborate on leopards mating, they won't mate just once or twice. They will mate for 3 to 5 days, and it will be a very intense mating period where they could copulate every 15 to 20 minutes for 3 to 5 days. And that makes it easier for us to find them, and we can hear them vocalizing as they fight with one another as the male dismounts after every 15, 20 minutes when they do copulate. I'm not having much luck on my phone here. I'm technologically not very sound, so I'm just going to focus on getting through all of your questions. But what I will do is I'll put up a picture. Well, it's on my Facebook page, so go and have a look through there and you'll be able to see. Now, we are still here in this abnormal environment for us. Oh, here comes the squirrel with another nut to take back to the pantry. So who knows where he's finding all of them. Oh, he snuck off, but I'm sure you would have got to see it there. So again, he's just filling up the pantry, making the most of this cool weather to go and forage for food. Now, as I was saying, usually we are not bound to the confinements of this shelter. We are usually out exploring, and it really is a magical place to explore because we get spoilt with incredible game viewing. And if you're a newcomer, it certainly is worth tuning in to this afternoon's drive, because there's going to be great potential for a leopard sighting, and not just a leopard sighting, a leopard with a kill that it made last night up in a tree. So that's something to look forward to, and it gives you an idea of what we're usually up to. The only other time that we will have these question and answer sessions is once a week, and the great time of the week to experience that is on Sundays. So on Sunday evening every week we have what we call a fireside chat, and that again is a good opportunity for us to stop and answer questions. The squirrel now has obviously deposited its marula nut kill, its marula seed that it's found in its pantry, and now it's going to look for some more. So again, it's just interesting little behavioral traits of animals that you learn that can help you to understand more about them. And it's about being out here and immersing ourselves in this wonderful environment that helps us to get a better idea of what's going on, and that way share it with you all across the world. So a lot of you may be wondering, especially Tina in Houston. Now, basically, Tina, welcome and thanks for the question. I'm also glad you asked this question because there's a bit of history behind, recent history behind this leopard and the kill that it's just made. Now, it was not last night, but the night before that the same leopard managed to catch a steenbok. Now, a steenbok is not a very big antelope. It stands about this high and probably weighs around 10 kilograms, so not big at all. And it managed to catch one, it fed on it, and it would have finished off that kill yesterday afternoon. And I believe Brent and all of you who were out there yesterday afternoon had a great afternoon with Kunyuma, finishing off that steenbok kill. So his belly would have been full, he would have been not likely hugely hungry and pressured to feed, but because of the torrential rainfall that we had last night and the thunder and the lightning, he would have known that this is a good opportunity for him to hunt, and he's taken that opportunity and managed to catch an impala. Nobody saw the kill. It was found this morning, and it would have happened sometime late last night. So that's all we know, and good for him, because it is important for the predators to make the most of these windows of opportunity, because they don't know when their next opportunity may arise to make a kill. We've got another question coming through. Thanks for that question though, Tina. And I hope that gives you a bit more insight into what we know about the kill. Okay, we just got a question through from Phil in Brooklyn. And I guess Phil's interested to know whether we get meerkats in this area, and the reason why is probably the squirrel is quite a similar looking animal to a meerkat. I'm just going to grab a book. In order to show you a meerkat. Okay, and we've just got an update from Brent and Steph. They haven't had any luck finding the leopard, but they are still out there searching, and either way I think it is more likely that this afternoon will be a great opportunity. I don't think the rain is going to subside to a level where we can head out, but the good news is, because we know where the kill is, the leopard's going to certainly return to it. Okay, why can I not find... Why can I not find it? This is Brent's books. I do not know my way around it. But anyway, a lot of you will have easy enough access to get to the meerkats and what exactly it is. They don't occur here, and they occur in drier, more arid areas of South Africa. So sadly we don't get them here. And like I say, if you'd like to see what a meerkat is, you can Google that, and it's MEERKAT. Okay, Nancy in Minnesota, welcome and thanks for sending through this question. Nancy's interested to know whether we get jackals in this area, and we certainly do, Nancy. We get both the side-striped jackal and the black-backed jackal. Now, interestingly enough, the black-backed jackal is more widely distributed through South Africa than the side-striped. However, in the specific area that we're in here, there is a higher population of the side-striped jackal relative to the black-backed. So we do get both, and if you tune into a few more drives, you'll definitely be able to see them, because we know on the Arathusa airstrip there's some side-striped jackal that we see there. And there is also one that we've started seeing on the quarantine clearings, which is just behind us over here. So they are out and about, and they're a very similar animal to a fox that, those of you may not know what to expect, it's a fox-like animal or a dog-like animal. They will scavenge as well as hunt for themselves, and depending on the area will have an impact on what exactly they hunt and who they scavenge from. But they are predatory, and they can feed on anything from small insects up to some of the larger mammals like impala or their young. Okay, so let me just go out and feel what this rain is doing. No, it's still a little bit too hard for us to head out, but we are going to keep the show going until probably 10 o'clock, so another 15 minutes or so, and there might be a window for us to sneak out and show you around, but like I say, this afternoon is going to be a wonderful drive for all of you. I'm heading off on leave today, so myself and Nikki are heading off, as well as Stefan. So just to let you know that, there'll be Mark and Brent, and the good news is actually that I've just got a message through now that Brent and Stefan did manage to find that leopard, but it was tucked under a very thick bush, which was giving it a bit of shelter from the rain, and its stomach is full from probably a combination of the steenbok that it was feeding on 2 nights or yesterday, finishing off, as well as the impala that it has already started to feed on that it caught last night. So full-bellied, under a bush, they can hardly see it. So even if it wasn't raining, we probably wouldn't have the best view. So they have found him though, so well done to them for finding, and obviously thanks to them for heading out in the rain in order to secure the sighting for us, had we have had a break in the weather that could have allowed us to go out. Got another question. Okay, Marianne in Boston. Now, Marianne would like to know what the insects are doing. It's a good question after all this rain. Insects typically are more common during our rainy season. So if you're planning a safari out here and you don't like bugs, try and come in winter. There's a lot less bugs around. But what we've already noticed this morning, having not seen certain insects for many months, just within a few hours of rain, they've come alive and come out of the cracks and their shelters in the wood. So we've seen millipedes walking around, which is a small worm-like animal, you could say. And even this morning, as I woke up, there were flying ants or reproductive termites, which are winged ants, flying ants, that will exit their termite mounds under the ground in order to head off in search of romance. So usually we get them during the main rainy season over November, December and January, but there was obviously a late batch that got this lucky window of opportunity after the rain to come out. So we've already seen flying ants, millipedes, flies and other bugs may also start to hatch and come out after this rain, but only time will tell. So in the next few drives it is going to be very interesting to see the changes in dynamics. You can never be sure what animals will do on a yearly basis. You can have an idea, but what I've noticed is that every year certain insects may be more prolific than in other years. Some years you may have very few, that you get these tiny little black stink bugs that are an absolute nightmare because they're so small and numerous that when they are attracted into camps, you often get a mouthful of them in your food, and it's the most disgusting taste you can imagine. But those little black stink bugs will vary in numbers. Some years they don't arrive, others years they are in their millions. So it will be interesting to see how the insects do react after this specific rainfall. Another question. Aha, Teal in Hamburg, good morning. Good question, Teal. Teal is interested to know, when planning a safari, which would be the best time of year to come here? Now, a lot would depend on your individual preferences, i.e., like I just mentioned, if you're scared of bugs, you don't want to be here in summer because that is when they are most numerous. But like most things in life, there are advantages and disadvantages to any season. The advantages of summer are the flowers, the migratory birds, the insects, which a lot of people find interesting. The new life. A lot of the herbivores will give birth in the early part of the rainy season, knowing full well that their youngsters will have huge amounts of food to feed on when they start growing, or when they need to start growing. So that's important. There's a lot of youngsters around. Disadvantages of summer is there's stronger chances of rain, and a rainy wet safari can be exciting, but at the same time it can also limit you to what you do, as well as the heat. It gets extremely hot here in our summer and humid, so you're less likely to spend longer game drives out there during the daylight, and you'd typically spend more time in the very early morning just as it's getting light, or later into the evening once it's got dark. Winter, on the other hand, oh sorry, one more thing, the vegetation. The vegetation in summer, naturally with all the rain, becomes very thick and green, and that can make it difficult to spot animals. It's important to remember that it makes it more difficult to see animals, but if you do come to either Djuma or Arathusa Private Game Reserve here in the Sabi Sands at any point, at any stage of year, your sightings will be good. So that you must know, but it does make it a little bit more difficult for us as the guides to find the animals. Now that it's beginning to dry out, we can see further into the bush, and therefore it makes it a little bit easier for us to find animals, but we often do find animals regardless of the season. Now, I personally prefer the winter and the drier months because of the coloration. I prefer the yellows and oranges as the vegetation begins to dry. I also find it easier to track animals as it's dry and dusty, and the pathways become more pronounced where the animals will walk. So tracking becomes a little bit easier, and again, that's my personal preference. I also like to be cool as opposed to hot, so those are just my personal preferences, but it is important to understand that this area is great for game viewing throughout the year, and the only seasonal peak that we will really notice throughout the year is due to holiday time, and the most common holiday time for us humans around the world is over December. So during that period there's a seasonal peak, but it's simply because that's when people have time off. But throughout the year people come to these lodges and have a wonderful time. Next question. Joanne in Chicago, good morning and welcome. Joanne is interested to know what kind of behavior would we expect from the elephants after this rain. They do love water, that's for certain. Therefore, this extra rain, I think, is going to have put a little bit of a spring in their step, and I could almost imagine a young elephant running around happily with its trunk flaying, and that again is something that you could look forward to seeing this afternoon. So yeah, I think the elephants are definitely going to have a smile on their faces, and they're also going to know that this is going to increase the growth of vegetation, making their life easier. They are herbivores, and the more food they have around, the happier they're going to be. So it certainly is going to make a difference. It's also interesting to note that elephants love water, and this is something that can be emphasized to the degree that they will actively seek out fresher or cleaner water when the opportunity presents itself. So now that we've had this fresh rain falling, it may have filled up puddles with this fresh water that's going to taste far sweeter than the muddy water that's been collecting in the dams and the water holes over the months. So they're going to have access to clean, fresh water in puddles all around, and they're certainly going to enjoy that. Another question. Well, this is a very interesting question, and I'm actually a little bit stumped. So Stephanie in Munich, thank you for sending through this interesting question, and I'm looking forward to dissecting it with you. Now, Stephanie is interested to know, would elephants move greater distances in the summer when there's more food around, or would they work further in the dry season? Now, the reason you may initially think it's an easy answer, there's less food in the dry season, therefore they need to cover bigger distances in order to get their food. And yes, I agree with that, and that's the most logical answer. But something to bear in mind is that elephants are very fussy eaters, and they will actively seek out specific trees or specific fruits at different times of the year. Now, what this may mean is that even in summer, when there's a bounty of food, they may move large distances in search for specific foods. And again, we can go back to the marula tree. The same seed that squirrel was eating and running off with for its pantry earlier would be the fruit that elephants love possibly the most in this area. And they would therefore possibly move large distances from marula tree to marula tree in order to eat as many of them as possible. Also, marula trees will ripen at different stages depending on the climates in any given area. So we may find the marula fruits here in the Sabi Sands ripened at a different stage to the other parts of the Kruger Park where elephants all have access to. So that's the beauty of this ecosystem that we're in. It's massive, and it allows animals to naturally move in search of food. So good question, but I think certainly in the dry season they will be covering more ground for both water and food. But there's been some really interesting research done when animals like elephants have got collars put around their necks, and that way can be tracked via satellite, and their movements can be mapped on a map, and that way you really sometimes get some inexplicable feedback and information from these transmitters. Elephants may be heading 100 miles in one direction, spending a day or two there and coming 100 miles straight back, and nobody knows why they do it, but there are these really interesting bits of information that can be sourced from the people doing the research on these animals. So good question though. Another question. Okay, a question from Katrina. Good morning, and thanks for sending this question through, Katrina. Katrina is interested to know, and I'm sure a lot of you are also interested, it's quite a commonly asked question, but it's a question that I love. Which animals outside of Africa, or even in Africa, that I have not seen yet would be on my bucket list? Now, it's a tough one because there are so many remarkable animals that occur in other wilderness destinations throughout the world. So I would like to probably start my list off with the tiger. Now, you get Siberian tiger and Bengal tiger, so you get different types of tiger up in the Asian part of the world. And up there, the various tigers that you may see are all beautiful, and it's an animal that I've yet to see in the wild. They're far bigger than lion, and an incredibly beautiful cat. So tiger would be high up on my list. Gorillas are another animal that I would almost chop my baby finger off to see. So they are an incredibly large primate, and every person that I've spoken to that has been lucky enough to encounter gorillas and go gorilla trekking have come back and said to me that it is a life-changing event that everybody should try and do. So judging from feedback from people that I know that have seen gorillas, and also just by the fact you can just look at a picture of a gorilla, they are mighty beasts that would be incredible to see in the flesh. So gorillas high up on the list. And then another animal that would take me to an area where I'd be able to see a lot more other interesting animals and scenery would be the polar bear. Now, you can go on Antarctic expeditions and in search of polar bears, and that would be another animal that I'd love to see. They're incredibly powerful predators. They are massive, and they undergo very interesting lifestyle changes as seasons change, and that would be another animal that I'd love to see. So those are three that come to mind, but there is a very long list. Okay, there's just a few more minutes, so we'll be able to answer one or two more questions. Sadly, the rain hasn't subsided, but we've tried our best. We did extend, and what a great opportunity it's been to answer all of your questions. Okay, well, the next question is another one that is of fairly common interest of a lot of the viewers, and that is, what is the most exciting or nerve-wracking experience that I've ever been in? And interestingly enough, a lot of you may think that it would be lion or leopard, and that is typically the animal that people who come to Africa are most scared of. But you shouldn't be, because there's actually other animals that can pose more of a threat to us as humans, likely the names of those animals being the hippo, the buffalo, and the elephant. Now, my specific encounter, which came close to being a fatal one, excuse me, was with I was taking 2 guests on a bushwalk. Thankfully, it was only 3 of us. Had there been more, it would have made the situation a little bit more dangerous, because you never know what the guests may do, and if they run off, the elephant could follow them, which is not what you want. You typically want to stand your ground. But that specific encounter lasted for about 20 minutes. The elephant did not stop charging. It kept us pinned down against the base of a tree where we took shelter. Excuse me. Until eventually a vehicle came. I called through on my handheld radio, and a vehicle came into the area and distracted the elephant, and the elephant actually ended up chasing the vehicle away and gave us a window of opportunity to escape. So that was my most scary encounter. It is on foot. It's not when we're in the vehicle that we typically get pestered. It is when we're walking that we have to be very, very careful. So just to recap, folks, the second vehicle will hopefully be up and running in the next day or two, so we'll be back to 2 vehicles very soon, so hang in there. We'll nearly be back to normal with that. Myself, Stefan, and Nikki are going on leave today, and as you can see, it's raining, and that's why we've been here. And thanks so much again for all the questions that you've sent through. We've all enjoyed taking turns and answering them, and I hope you've enjoyed what we've had to share with you. Now, again, we don't know how long this rain is going to last, but hopefully it subsides this afternoon, and that way either Mark or Brent, depending on who goes out, will be able to go and share some time with Kunyuma, a young male leopard who's got a kill nearby. So that's something that's in the bank, and weather permitting, we will be out there to enjoy it. So like I say, a big thank you to everyone in the final control, Nikki and Tara.